Welcome to the Canby City Council regular meeting for January 16th, 2019. If you please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear God, thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for our leaders that are up here on the dais this evening. I ask for wisdom and guidance, and I ask for calm and peace. Thank you so much for this great community that we have. Guide us through our deliberations this evening, and I ask these things in your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And actually this evening is an addendum to the, or an add-on to our invocation this evening. I'd like to introduce a guest, Rajan Zed, please, to do an invocation, or add to our invocation this evening. So if you want to...
May I hold this for you?
Can you put it here? Thank you, Mayor Hodgson and Council Member Spoon for having me here. I really appreciate it. I will read from Hindu scriptures, which is as old as 1500 BCE. We read in Sanskrit, then translated to English. So nothing is written by me, it is all from scriptures. I am honored to be in the city of Canby, which is a wonderful city, as I heard. Om Bhur-Bhuvah Svah Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yo Na Prachodayat. We meditate on the transcendental glory of the Deity Supreme, who is inside the heart of the earth, inside the life of the sky, and inside the soul of the heaven. May He stimulate and illuminate our minds. Asto ma sadgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityor mamrutam gamya. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Tasmada sakta statam karyam karma samachara. Asakto haya charan karma. Parmapanoti purusha. Karmanevahi samsiddhi. Mastita jankadya. Loka sangreha mevapi. Sampa shankar tumrahasi. Strive constantly to serve the welfare of the world by devotion to selfless. One attains the supreme goal of life. Do your work with the welfare of others always in mind. Om Saha Navavtu, Saha Nobunaktu, Saha Viryan Karba Bahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvisa Bahai. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we work together with great vigor. May our study be enlightening. May no obstacle arise between us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om. Thank you. I will request, can I have a picture with the council, please?
Pardon me?
Can we have a picture with the council?
Yes, absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Thank
you. You can have it here.
Maybe squeeze a little tighter.
Yeah,
You really want to be able to. Yes, please do.
a little bit more, that's it.
And please let me use the other camera too.
next on our agenda this evening is the swearing-in of Councillor Greg Parker. Judge,
Well, I'm ready if he is. Okay. Well, raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Greg Parker,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I have been duly elected to the office of City Councilor
that I have been duly elected to the office of City Councilor
of the City of Canby
of the City of Canby
at the general election on November 16th, 2018,
on the general election of November 16th, 2018,
and being that I am qualified elector of the City of Canby,
and that I am a qualified elector of the City of Canby,
and that I have resided in the City of Canby, Oregon,
and that I have resided in the City of Canby, Oregon,
for not less than 12 months,
for not less than 12 months,
immediately prior to November 6th, 2018,
immediately prior to November 6, 2018,
and that I will support the Constitution and laws
and that I will support the Constitution and laws
of the United States and the State of Oregon,
of the United States and the State of Oregon,
and will faithfully perform the duties
and will faithfully perform the duties
of the office of City Councilor
of the office of City Councilor
of the City of Canby,
of the City of Canby,
to which I have been elected,
to which I have been elected.
so help me God.
So help me God.
So help me.
Thanks, Judge.
You're welcome. Right there. Could I get you to turn this over? Good job. Gotcha. Immortalized forever.
you had your chance, Greg. Now you're stuck. Welcome, sir.
Got me for another 4 years, but I look at it both ways.
And I look forward to it. Well, welcome back aboard, sir.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Friends of the Library check presentation.
One of our favorite times.
Yes.
Mayor Hodson,
Yes.
City Council. So on behalf of the Friends of the Canby Public Library, I am pleased to present the city with a check for $10,881.24. This pays for all of the programs from July through December of 2018. In addition to the regular programs that we've provided for so many years, last year we also added some additional programs for our teens, and that's why this check is more than it has been in the past. This is to support the efforts in Canby for the teen suicide prevention program. In addition to this $10,000, in the past few months, we've also spent more than $10,000 to try to help finish the teen room, and we will be spending a few more thousand in the months to come as well. So we're very happy to be a part of the City of Canby and to support the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Wow. Thank you.
I didn't hear the name.
Thank you so very, very much. Wow.
All these photos.
Come this way. You all show the account. How's that? We'll show you the check.
Yeah, show the check.
Cover the account.
There, I'm just going to cover the account number.
Of course you will.
Well,
Can donations be made now?
Yes.
Right
Right
up
next
front.
door.
I can make it bigger,
You
so.
did that. Well, thank you, and thank you to the Friends of the Library. You have all been working so very tirelessly on the teen center and finishing that up and the library pieces of the program. So thank you very much for this. We really appreciate it. Next on the agenda is an update on the splash pad by the Park and Rec Advisory Board. Am I seeing any? Is there anyone from the Park Advisory Board to present tonight?
Ackerman?
No. Splash pad.
Mark's not here?
It does not appear that way. So, I will, Barry, do you want to take a go at it, and I'll take a go and you can fill in?
I'll take a go at it and you can jump on me. So the Parks and Rec Board, we met and we've identified some areas that we thought would be good candidates for the splash pad in the city. We have opened that up and are going to do a public hearing, public meeting.
Barry, I'm sorry, can you use the microphone there?
Let me slide over. I'll just go over here. So we looked at 3 locations, and then we've decided in talking with council that it might be beneficial to open it up to the public. We're going to have a public meeting, correct me on the date, it's going to be Tuesday the 29th? Tuesday the 29th, we're going to have a public meeting to hear what the community would like to see or where they might like it, take some feedback, and, you know, it may come back to the 3 locations that we have already, you know, kind of pinpointed, but, you know, it's good to hear what the public has to say, hear what feedback they have, take some pros and cons, weigh things out, and, you know, go from there. So Tuesday, I think it's at 7 o'clock. Is that what? 6:30. Thanks, Scott. 6:30, and I believe we're going to, the location is
Here in the council chambers.
Council chambers, okay. So Tuesday, 6:30, council chambers, a meeting in regards to the splash pad. We'll go over the pros and cons of the 3 locations that we've identified currently, Maple Street, Waite Park, and Legacy. We'll go over those pros and cons, and then we'll hear any other ideas. So that's about all.
Great.
Great job.
Thank you, Barry. I appreciate the work you guys have been doing on it.
We love it.
Good. Next thing, keeping with the themes of park this evening, so on the screen there, we're looking at tonight, trying to get some consensus from the council to move forward with a field feasibility design study for the Ackerman Field. So just as a kind of a recap for everyone, so towards, I think, towards the end of last year, about November, myself, Barry Johnson, Mike Zagova from the school board, Trip Goodall, and Rick Robinson had met to begin conversation on the possibility of what it would take to utilize better the fields at Ackerman Junior High, as you see there in the picture. So, based on the recommendation, our thoughts in that conversation was that more information needs to be gathered up in terms of what could be laid out here in terms of this park. So you can see, my little pointer, but we're looking at about 20 acres there of green space to be looked at and talked about in development. And so the idea would be this first phase or this first piece is to do the feasibility study, which is about $7,000 to go and get just a couple of schematics drawn on what it could look like. So where could the baseball fields go? Do we need the track? Do we want the track? You know, what do we need additional parking? Where could that go? So just really kind of taking a look at what could be on this property right now. The idea is to maximize the fields to be able to touch all of can-be used sports that use fields. So soccer, lacrosse, rugby maybe, baseball, softball, what am I leaving out? Football. So yeah, thanks, Joe. too many football injuries myself. And so that's the next step that we're looking at. So really, right now, I'm just asking the council to, just looking for a nod.
Context.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. This is not the design of the complex. This is a 50,000-foot analysis of whether it's even feasible to put a complex here, and however it ultimately would look, and if it's feasible to do it, what the range of costs would be, and determine if that in fact is feasible as well. If we're looking at spending systems development charges, park STCs, in the development, how much is the city willing to invest of its park capital money to develop a project like this? There was a little bit of misunderstanding, I think, relative to what the intent of this study is not to have a final layout for the ball fields, is to say, if you were to take this approach, this is the range of costs that you would be looking at. If you were to take this approach, this is the range of costs you would be looking at. If after this study, $6,200 study, is completed, the council and the Park Advisory Board and the school board all say, wow, this looks like it's something that could be doable. Then we move into the official phase, which is the development of a task force that would work together to do the true layout of the fields, what's best going to meet the needs of all of the sports in the community, how best to align those fields, and then develop a more elaborate plan for the layout and then the supporting infrastructure to make that layout work. Which of the fields would be artificial turf, which of them would be grass, all of those questions happen in a final form later on, and that's a significantly greater cost. But I just want to make it clear that the end of this initial stage isn't a program layout and a plan ahead. It's just kind of a basic determination of what the cost would be under a couple different scenarios, and we'll try to be realistic about what those scenarios could look like. But and then if we get the green light from the council and all of the decision makers, then the next step in the process would be to formulate a community-based working group that would begin doing that more formal work, taking community and public input, and then developing a plan and concept around that. But there are several steps precedent to actually being able to jump into the formal planning process and the larger community input to determine what the layout in fact would really look like and how it can best meet the needs of the public. If we tried to do that now, a $6,000, 50,000-foot project would be about 5 times that much, and we don't really want to commit those kinds of resources until we can make a determination whether the project on its surface is viable.
Thank you. Yes.
So maybe I misunderstood from either a previous conversation or an email chain, but the cost of this feasibility study, which is not the plan, is $40,000 to $50,000?
No, this part is
Okay.
$6,200.
Okay, I see
Moving-
just the number 40 to 50,000 and it took me by surprise.
Yeah, that's the next, that
Okay.
would be the next level study.
The next level study, as Rick was saying, is going to be the one where we start looking at, okay, putting together cost estimates, design, and then all the work that could entail in that piece.
The community charrettes,
Right.
all of the process that would bring into direct contact with the consultants, the
Perfect.
interests of the members of the community that are most likely to use these fields.
No, that's good. The only number on that form I saw was 40 to 50. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand. My follow-up thought to that is that I really see that in our park system, we have 2 potential large projects. This would be one of them, and the other one would be Wayside. And I would like to see a similar project be done for what could potentially be done with the Wayside project, because if we're going to make a large project decision about where massive amounts of SDCs go, I would like a comparison point, because we only have so much in SDCs and we're only going to be able to complete one large project. So I'm comfortable moving forward with a feasibility project like this, if we can do a similar one for the Wayside project, so we have a comparison point when we're talking about spending millions of dollars of SDCs as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars of SDCs.
And I have an idea about that, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Spoon. Councilor Parker?
Actually, Sarah, that helps where I was going with this. I'm okay with this, particularly 50,000 feet. I'm more comfortable at 30,000 feet, but I guess that would cost more money if we were to get closer. So I see this as a reasonable amount of money. My father's words ring in my ear about if we're always looking at short-term things, we'll never get to long-term goals. We've talked about this master plan. It was directed that it be put out on the streets. I understand that this is an opportunity that we had not realized when we were talking about the master plan, and I get that. Plans have to change. But taking in what Councilor Spoon said, that maybe it would take a little bit of reworking of the RFP. We haven't sent it out yet, but to be able to include in the RFP this type of review of the Wayside Park. I don't think that the last version I saw of the RFP proposal for a master plan for the parks would have excluded it, but we might just want to specifically mention it. That's one point. The other point has to do with synchronizing the master plan, assuming that we can get that going, and if we proceed to phase 2 of the Ackerman plan, because you're going to have charrettes for both of them, and synchronizing them may make some sense. So we don't have to make those sort of decisions now, but I'd like staff to be thinking about that, of how we move ahead in something that saves energy. I'm dedicated to us getting a master plan on the parks that takes a 30 or 50,000 foot look at all of our recreational and park opportunities. I understand this is a discrete look. I'm fine with that, but I don't want it to be an either-or thing where we move ahead with this and we push back further on the master plan.
I actually think there's a lot of merit if the majority of the council wants to proceed. I love the Wayside properties; they're a personal favorite of mine, but wants to proceed with the same type of very, very high level study. I think that's something that we can do. It's not a big investment, and if you feel that you need that additional information to be informed, we can probably have that conversation, and it's going to be a significantly different kind of conversation because we don't have a proposed use for it right now. There are limitations under our agreement with the county on the uses of that property, but those limitations are, because it's a contract, they're negotiable, and we'd have to work with that. I think it's a good idea, and I think it could. And probably if we're looking at two possible big ideas, I think it probably should happen just in advance of the master plan so that you have the same basic core information. Even if the decision is made to proceed with the Ackerman plan, that's kind of a nice ring to it, and move that forward, we could still be working kind of just a step behind on the other, and that would allow us to incorporate the findings of both of those into a revised park master plan, a more comprehensive park master plan that identifies these as specific deliverables. I think there's a way to accomplish both without sacrificing either.
I'm fine with it then, Mayor.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts on it?
There's one down here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, did I interrupt?
No.
Okay. I like how it's inexpensive. It's an inexpensive initial step to get a sense for whether it's even feasible. And then after that, then the big questions will be, okay, let's look at these intergovernmental agreements, and that's where it gets serious. But I do like kind of this basic screening step. So yeah, let's do it. Sounds
Yeah, the IGA or intergovernmental agreement piece to this is definitely going to be where a lot of the conversation is going to come down in terms of, a lot of the dialogue right now about a lot of the, we'll say, ball fields, and that encompasses quite a range of sports, tend to be on school district property. And so access gets limited to those ball fields to just school hours. So is this an opportunity to get fields that are not on school property and develop that piece, you know? And then, so the reason for this step is, again, I know my council wanting more information sometimes on these things, but then also the school board wants more information on what it would look like, you know, because then not to get too crazy and get wrapped around the axle, then, you know, you look around the conversation about Ackerman and what's the future of Ackerman and what could that potentially be down the road. So first piece is first, and that's the field concept and, you know, what we can do with that. So if we're good on that.
And I do have to admit, and I think it's important and relevant to this conversation, that with the mayor's concurrence, we kind of put a stop to the next step in the discussions pending a better understanding of what the cost implications would be. Because if they alone are deal breakers, we don't want to invest a lot of school staff resources in pursuing a project that just doesn't have any realistic possibility of success. And $6,000, you know, you can burn up $6,000 of staff time in the blink of an eye and not have anything definitive to show for it. So I appreciate the mayor's recommendation of pursuing this approach, and it worked really well, and we were able to find a consultant to do it.
Great.
What would the cost of a splash pad be?
Well,
We don't know.
that's not been determined yet. We've gotten various ranging in prices, and it depends on, you know, which park the splash pad may get put in, or if we look at a different piece of property even. I mean, so there's a lot of factors still yet to be vetted out on that aspect.
And these are not mutually exclusive projects, just for clarification. I think if the end result of this initial study was that we expended all of the city's SDCs, that it probably would be a non-starter.
Okay. So everyone's okay with moving through this next step piece then?
Yeah, did we leave with the idea that we would maybe do the same thing with Wayside, or where?
I'm
Yeah,
interested,
there were.
if it's
Yeah,
inexpensive.
I'll work to put something together.
Okay.
And we may be able to talk to the consultant about looking at that'll take a little more staff time, because we'll want to do the research and not have the consultant do it. So we'll pull up the historic documents that define the limitations and see what flexibility. We'll have an initial conversation with county staff to determine what we could accomplish.
I think that they're both potentially transformative projects for our community, so I'm excited to look at both of them as possibilities.
Okay.
That's fair.
Citizen comment.
Barry, would you like to address the council on this topic?
Again, for Parks and Rec, I just have a question in regards to the Wayside Park. I believe that we had a master plan for Wayside Park, and there were 3 phases to be developed. If I'm not mistaken, Matilda's already done that. Is that correct?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do have a master plan for the Wayside properties, some of which we put together as it relates to the trails. The larger portion is still kind of undesignated right now. It's largely wetlands, and so it has limited use, and that's the portion immediately adjacent to Territorial Road, and it would be east of North Redwood. That area and east of Willow Creek is the area that I think the council is speaking of, and we haven't done anything definitive or in-depth on that property yet.
Right, and I don't know if Sarah, was leading toward, since I've been on Parks and Recreation, I guess we haven't really delved into the master plan for Wayside Park, but it seems like, would we not, if you're looking for a kind of an equal.
No, maybe I can answer your question. My concern is that we've had some brief discussions about the cost of of the Ackerman, the potential cost of the Ackerman project, which is largely variant. And my concern is that with the amount of SDCs we have one large project amount of SDCs. And I want to make sure that we're evaluating both of our large project options and not just assuming that, you know what I mean, not just pursuing one, because I think both have transformative value to our community. And I just want to make sure if we have X amount of dollars to spend, that we're using them, you know what I mean, that we've done our due diligence and making sure that we're using them correctly. And I don't actually have a preference one or the other. I just don't want to make the assumption that we have one large project and not even consider what the alternative project could look like, because if we're talking about spending potentially millions of dollars on a project.
And I guess what I'm asking, wouldn't we take phase one of the Willamette Wayside, or the Wayside Park, wouldn't we take phase one and kind of cost that out in comparison to phase one of Ackerman? Is that where you're headed? Phase one of Ackerman versus phase one of Wayside, and kind of look at the cost of.
Well, I think we need to start to determine whether this governing body still accepts phase one of the Wayside properties as the appropriate next step in determining that cost. So we may be a half step away, and that's why I said that before we can even pursue the next step, as Councilor Spoon has indicated, staff will need to do a little bit of research to determine what that next step would really look like, and specifically what we would be asking for in terms of a deliverable if we were to bring a consultant on board.
Yeah.
So I think we're just a step away from that.
Okay, that's fine. I mean,
I'm not interested in spending tons of money trying to figure it out. I just want to get a sense of if we only have the money for one project, what's our potential?
true, and I guess I might also add that I think if, looking further down the road, whichever one, if this gets off the ground, I mean, I think this would bring in more business to the community. I think by having tournaments and things like that on this sports complex, you're going to bring more people into the community that'll spend money at the restaurants and whatever. I mean, as opposed to Wayside, where, you know, people will come and walk. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I don't want to get in the...
Well, and I think,
Right.
Yeah, and I think to Councilor Spoon's point, I think it's worth looking at, and I think something else too for us. I think with a number of us on the council that haven't even probably looked at the Wayside master plan in greater detail, that maybe, and now we've got a number of new parks board members, maybe that's a joint work session that we can do to talk about that piece. So, you know,
Can I just answer his last question? No, just to be clear, because I do think that this has a ton of economic development potential for our community. Yeah. But I think that the reason I'm curious about Wayside is because we have no river access right now. And the river access potential for an amphitheater, I mean, there are economic development opportunities there too. And that is a driver for me, is which one brings the most money, which is why I want to be able to see, like, what's the potential of both projects at a huge, big picture, so that we can make some real decisions, just to clarify the difference.
Councilor Parker?
And Barry, for me, one of the things that's changed since the Wayside Master Plan has been completed and today is that we went through a community visioning process. And I think the second or third suggestion that came out of that was development of riverfront property, even down to specifics of a dock and river access and that sort of thing. So more recently than the Wayside plan, we actually have a visioning plan where we ask our citizens, what do you want in a community? And we've heard that. And I just think that that's important to honor that. And as we're doing a planning process of at least saying, what would that look like?
Sure. That's fine. I didn't want to muddy up the water.
Not at all. Not at all. You're good. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Mayor, in the interest, just so we're because we forgot to start the timekeeping when we were taking citizen comment, can we get through the proclamation first, and then when we know to citizen comment, we'll limit everybody to 3 minutes?
I know. My other card I have here, though, is on the parks piece.
What do you say?
Okay, well, it's your meeting, for sure.
I know.
I just didn't want the proclamation to be lost in the mix.
No, it's still right here on my list to do. I just
Okay,
want to make
perfect.
sure that if Ms. Fenton is here wants to ask a question about the Ackerman project or the sports piece, the sports complex, or is this on a broader non-agenda item?
It's on parks use. but-
Okay, so I'm going to move your card into the citizen comment period. Is that okay? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Joe. So I will move into the proclamation right now, so thank you, Joe. So proclamation tonight is the Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to advancing equality, social justice, and opportunity for all, and challenged all Americans to participate in the never-ending work of building a more perfect union. And whereas Dr. King's teachings can continue to guide and inspire us in addressing challenges in our communities, and whereas the King Holiday and Service Act, enacted in 1994, designated the King Holiday as a National Day of Volunteer Service and charged the Corporation for National and Community Service with leading this effort. And whereas since 1994, millions of Americans have been inspired by the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to serve their neighborhoods and communities on the King Holiday. And whereas serving on the King Holiday is an appropriate way to honor Dr. King, meet local and national needs, bring our citizens together, and strengthen our communities in union. And whereas the King Day of Service is the only federal holiday commemorated as a national day of service and offers an opportunity for Americans to give back to their communities on the holiday and make an ongoing commitment to service throughout the year. And whereas King Day of Service projects are being organized by a wide range of nonprofit and community organizations, educational institutions, public agencies, private businesses, and other organizations across the nation. And whereas each of us can and must contribute to making our communities better with increased opportunity for all of our citizens. And whereas citizens of Canby have the opportunity to participate in events throughout our city on the King Day of Service, January 21st, 2019, as well as create and implement community service projects where they identify the need. Now, therefore, I, Brian Hodson, the mayor of the city of Canby, do hereby proclaim the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as a day of service in Canby and call upon the people of Canby to tribute to the life and works of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. through participation in community service projects on Martin Luther King Day and throughout the year. Given under my hand this 16th day of January 2019 in the city of Canby, Oregon. So back when I worked with Starbucks, the company made a decision on Martin Luther King Day to turn that day into a day of service for all the managers and employees. And so it's something that's been kind of mulling around in my head and whatnot the last couple of years. I thought this is something that I'm glad that we're able to do and want to do. And so I reached out to Tony Crawford and asked for him to help me organize something in terms of, is the initial baby step to do just a proclamation and then try to figure out next year a project. And Tony was like, no, we can totally do a project. Let's try to do something. And that's Tony's style. And so partnering with Tony and Betty and the Canby Kiwanians, I believe we have a project available on that day. Tony, you want to talk about it, or? Would you like me to speak to you? I would appreciate that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Tony Crawford, President of Canby Kiwanis. First thing that I have learned is always give credit where credit is due. So I'd like to draw attention to the committee chair who took on this designated project, and that's my wife, Betty Crawford. So let the record reflect I gave appropriate notice.
To his wife.
I get to go home tonight. So, listen, one of the things Canby Kiwanis is proud to do is to support Mayor Hodson with this proclamation of a day of service and to offer to all citizens and all residents of Canby to join us for a particular project. You may recall that Canby Kiwanis has taken on cleanup periodically of Eco Park. And so what we are going to do is gather at 2 p.m. Monday, January 21st at Eco Park and begin a walk of the logging road toward Southeast 13th Avenue. And what we want to do is engage in a cleanup of the logging road, and we'll provide the bags, and we'll have some plastic gloves for people to cover up with. Bring your rain gear in case it's foul weather, but we'll look forward to a day outdoors and a vigorous effort to clean up the logging road and make it nice for all of us who make use of it. So thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, and we're glad to partner with you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Nice, thanks.
Moving to communications. Anything, Mr. Robinson? No? All right. First opportunity for citizen input and community announcements. So this is an opportunity for audience members to address the City Council on items not on the agenda. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Please fill out a yellow card. They're there on the back. And make sure that our city recorder gets them, and we will make sure that you are given time to address us. Staff and City Council will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizen input before the night's meeting end, or as quickly as possible thereafter. For agenda items, please fill out a card as well, and we'll bring that up during the agenda. The 2 items I have, 2. The first one is former Mayor Terry Prince to talk about the Canby Ferry and the bridge proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Evening, sir. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. Hi. I'm here to talk about the county's proposal for removing the Canby Ferry or keeping it or a bridge. And I went to the meeting last night. It was well attended. There was at least 100 to 150 people there. To make a long story short, the county spent a lot of time talking about a new bridge and very little about what they were going to do with the ferry. And our concern is, or at least my concern and everyone else that was there that night, was not in favor of a bridge. They weren't in favor of a bridge that would cost $51 million, but through bonds would cost an additional $129 million or $121 million. It comes to the heart of Canby about what that would do to this community. It has to do with the fact that quality of life, when you're talking about sending hundreds or thousands of cars into North Canby off a bridge, with I-5 backed up and 205 backed up and possible tolls coming in, and Canby being used as a back way to get around tolls, it would affect our quality of life drastically. The county also mentioned that they would not do any improvements on the road much past about 600 feet. So that means Canby would be on the hook for all the truck and traffic that would be headed either down Birch or Ivy or Hawley or Territorial. And my purpose here tonight was just to remind you of that, and that I think it would be very much, the citizens would appreciate the council to go ahead and make a decision on this about if they would support something like that. I'm asking 2 different things. I'm asking if the citizens, if you would be interested in either supporting the ferry, but more importantly, if you would join the citizens of Canby and please listen to the tapes of that meeting. There were a lot of good points brought up, and I think if you really look at it really hard, I think you'll see that this isn't something for Canby. I don't believe we want to be a community that is a pass-through for traffic going south to Woodburn, to Molalla, to Silverton. It's not our responsibility to take care of Metro's traffic. So please take a look at that, the minutes on that, and I can give you some time limits on this. The county's going to look at it for the first time on January 30th in their meeting, but there's no comment allowed there. But they do show that on February 14th, or excuse me, I think that's, I haven't got my glasses on, 19th. Thank you, Councilor Hensley, that they will have a question and answer period then. But this is something that's going to drastically affect Canby. And the fact that they're not going to do anything to take care of the roads either direction makes it also a dangerous situation for trucks. So, and neither, excuse me if I'm up for, my time's up, but I think people of this community have a quality of life in mind when they move here, and one of them is not to be an area where we are a place for pass-through traffic for another third crossing to the Willamette River. So thank you for your time and appreciate everything you do.
Thanks, Jerry. And it is in my notes here this evening under mayor's business to talk with the council about the bridge and the ferry, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. Ms. Fenton.
Hello.
Hi, Karen, how are you?
Good. I just wanted to comment on something that I had heard in the meeting tonight, and I have heard a couple times before, which is that in looking at our parks land and our land use in Canby, that if we fall into the trap of deciding whether our land is of value according to what economic benefit it would bring, then I think we're going down the wrong path, that land can be valuable just because it's beautiful, and it makes for a quality of life that draws people to a community in ways that you might not even notice. And so I've been spending time here and there in Portland lately and noticing the beautiful lands that have been set aside because someone had the forethought to really value land and just set it aside for park use. And so I would hope that we would do that in Canby, have the forethought to value our land and set it aside. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Patty Green of the Shakespeare Project.
Good evening.
Hi, Patty. How are you?
Good. My name is Patty Green. I live at 2392 Southeast First Avenue, Canby, Oregon. I'd like to talk to you about the Shakespeare Project. I went to I've been to all the meetings. I've also been to these gentlemen's meeting in front of the Planning Committee. They're going to put the Shakespeare Project in at Molino and First Avenue and Walnut. It's a building that's almost over 500,000 square feet. This is a distribution center that will deliver liquid, one of our top 2 heaviest products. We already have the steel companies. Now we're going to let this liquid distributor that's going to run over 1,000 trucks a day out on our roads in Canby, 24/7. They're around the clock, mainly directly in front of my house. So they did a traffic study because I asked them, they had to. The only place they've failed to do this study is in front of my house, where they want 1,000 trucks to pull out of their driveway and turn down Walnut now because they've stated in the meeting that they're not going to be allowed to go down first. So it's just going to be a revolving wall, literally, in front of my house. If this project, the Shakespeare Project, is allowed to pass, our streets anywhere in the city they can use. Sequoia Parkway, that's what they should use, the Sequoia Parkway. That's what it was built for, the industrial parkway. They should not be coming down Hines to First Avenue, then turn into the yard. I've seen statements that state they should not even have any driveways on First Avenue because the county didn't allow it because of our homes across the street. Everything was supposed to go in the city on Walnut, because you can't go down Malino because that's county. So it was a vote at the planning committee, 3-3 for this project, because they didn't want the traffic going by their house, and they were only in, half of the road. They only fix half of the road. Even the committee said, I'm going to use the road that's fixed. Well, of course you are. There's a lot going on here with this. I'm not saying that we have codes, we have things set in place that doesn't let these things happen. Well, from my understanding, this business is going to let them all pass. They're not going to listen to any of these. 12 employees per acre. They're 250 short. They only had 120 employees. All these trucks that are coming are not their employees. They have no jurisdiction over them. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Joe and Rick, my understanding is so the Shakespeare has been heard by the Planning Commission and was unanimously approved, correct? Okay, and so we're in the appeal window to that, so there is a possibility that could come to us. So right now, so there's not a lot that we can say on that topic right now until we know for sure we're not going to hear it. So yeah, so I appreciate you at least coming and let us know where you're at with that, so thank you.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know that right now on that particular project, until we know for sure there's an appeal or not, there's not a lot we can say or reference to that topic at this time. So if it does come before us, then we'll be able to address that. So, all right, the other cards I have are regarding agenda items, so if there's nothing else, we'll move forward. Moving into mayor's business, just a couple of things on there. First off the top, I want to address the invocation. This week, so myself as mayor, I get the opportunity, there's about 3 things I have power or authority to do, and setting the agenda is one of those. And so back in 2015, I made the change on the agenda to move from a moment of silence to an invocation. And in that process, I've tried to, I've been approached about making changes in terms of my language and verbiage around the invocation, and that it's not inclusive enough, or that it's too Christian in nature. So we had some input from people about wanting to change that, and volunteers to come and speak and whatnot. And so about a year ago, I tightened up the invocation piece to where it was just me doing the invocation. I stopped having Councilor Dale do that. I tried to change some of the language. Some weeks I'm better at it than others. And so that piece, those changes have been made. Why I bring this up tonight is because the gentleman that was here this evening, Mr. Rajan Zed, reached out to me about a week ago and asked to be able to do the invocation. And initially, my conversation, an email exchange with him, was that I do the invocation. And the reason I've kept the invocation in this piece, I'll elaborate a little bit more on that, is because the invocation for me helps center me in terms of getting ready to gear up for this evening. I believe in prayer. I believe in that aspect of it. I believe we as leaders need that piece. So I extended the offer to Mr. Rajan Zed to, please come and use our time during public comment. And he said, no, I'd really like for you to reconsider that piece of it. And I stayed to where my position was on it. So today, with actually quite a bit of conversation. I mean, most of the last couple of days this has been kind of just weighing on me and talking with a few people. And so I invited him, and it was, much later in the day, and I wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be able to make it or not, to come and share that time today, which is what you saw. And it makes it was a choppy handling of the situation, and I bring it up to you because I believe that there's probably comment this evening coming about that, and so, but also because I want people to know, that I do care very much about the process and the invocation piece, but also the people that can come to our community and our community as a whole. Like I said, I own this and could have handled his request much better than I did, and I owe you an apology, Councilor Spoon, on that. I did the invocation, like I said, because it's a piece for me. It centers me, and I think, like I said, the leaders need to be prayed for, be shown encouragement, have kind words to say to us, because there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that weighs on our shoulders, and there's a lot coming up in the city that we've got to deal with. So that's why I do it, and that's why I continue to do it, and I've tailored, at the request of some on the council, to change some of the words. Mr. Rajan Zed is not here, and I apologize to him on the choppiness of how this was handled, and so I know that this doesn't make it right, this doesn't necessarily make it better, just that I will, talk with some more with Joe on, and with Kim on how we can do this better, so the next time this isn't so choppy and fumbled in that regards. So I just wanted to share that with you, and that may be more than many of you want to know, but I just want you all to know that. So, so thank you. I'm moving into the rest of my business this evening. I want to welcome, there's a group of junior high students from South Korea in town. So if you see them around town, please welcome them and make them feel welcome here in Canby. So far, they're having a great time. I think tomorrow is the zoo in OMSI, and Friday is the state capitol, and their most favorite stop is the Nike outlet store in Woodburn. Park Advisory Board, we heard the splash pad discussion, so there's more coming on that, the Ackerman Field project. The new board members, they originally had one opening, then I guess there was 2 recent resignations, so they interviewed 3 people, and it sounds like we'll be confirming them at our next meeting. Is that correct, Kim? And then on the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee front, nothing to report right now. We didn't have a January meeting, and so the February one is coming up. The Canby Ferry update. So last night there was a community meeting, as former Mayor Terry Prince mentioned, there at Canby Foursquare. Terry, I counted almost 200 people, but I'll go with 150 if you know. So. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a good turnout for that piece. Also, the team at Clackamas County did a presentation at the Chamber of Commerce luncheon at the beginning of January. So they're definitely getting out there and trying to share the information and get the feedback. As was mentioned, so on February 19th at 6 o'clock at Canby Foursquare, the Board of County Commissioners are going to be there to do a question and answer. And a lot of, I got a number of inquiries from people last night while I was there about what's the council's position on the ferry and the bridge. And I know Councilor Varwig and Councilor Spoon or Hensley were at the meeting last night, and I know that Councilor Spoon was at the chamber, and you were there last night as well? Okay. And I know that we had the packet or the information sent to us, and so I guess my question is one, does the council want to take a position and deliver that to the Board of County Commissioners? So I look at it as two pieces, potentially position on the ferry and on the bridge. The earliest that, now we've got on the agenda for March, the board of, county staff to come and present the same presentation to us, but it's not till March. And with the board's meeting and doing a Q&A in February, I'd like to try to have something to them before the February 19th meeting to do that. So that would mean putting a discussion piece on our agenda for the first meeting in February.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mayor, I know you had to leave for the Parks meeting. Councilor Varwig and I were there till the bitter end. I think we got out of there about 9:30 because it went an hour over. And then we were talking with a couple of commissioners afterwards. And one of them actually said that he heard loud and clear that this community doesn't want the bridge, and that he's actually leaning away from it personally in his own mind right now, based on that. So I'm hoping that that holds true. But I think that it's important, and I do look at it as two different issues completely. And the ferry, I think, is a more emotional topic that maybe we should kind of shy away from that one, because I personally, I'm not speaking for the council, I personally don't think that the county has done its full due diligence in exploring all options and cutting costs and trying to make it viable. And I hope that they do that. I did mention it to them last night. But I do think that we should discuss and take a position on the bridge. I think our citizens expect that from us, and I think we should do it ahead of the February 19th meeting. And I see heads nodding. Thank you.
I did corner, and I'll use names, Commissioner Savas, and he did ask if that was, and it could be a conversation piece, if that's the operation of the ferry is something we want to take over. And now, again, mathematically, if I remember from last night's presentation, you're talking about taking on $600,000 in operating costs out of our budget.
I don't see that as a viable option. But
I half seriously, half jokingly said, probably not. But I'm put it before you as a potential conversation piece. So.
Well, maybe some kind of IGA and a partnership possibly, but I don't know if that would even be viable. They also, one person mentioned the idea of possibly doing like an LID, but like a ferry district. So they hadn't even considered that. So there is more discussion, I think, going to be happening on the county level about the ferry. And so without more information, I don't know that we can take a position on that. And personally, I think we should stick with the bridge and take a position and do it quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on that, is that it's two separate issues. Save the ferry or not, and alternatively build a bridge or not. And so, yeah, I definitely think we need to take a position on the bridge. I think, as Councilor Hensley mentioned, there's a lot of additional options. If we take a no position on the bridge, then we can ask the question, what do we do with the ferry after that? And so I think the position that we need to take first before the meeting is bridge or no bridge, and then talk about the ferry after that.
Okay.
I'll concur with the addition that I agree that I think that there's more work to be done on whether or not the ferry is viable. I think simple things like even putting a square reader on the ferry would help. If I could use a credit card in 2018, that would be great.
That was actually mentioned last night, yeah.
Or 2019. So I think that there are other options that haven't been really discussed in terms of viability of the ferry. That's an emotional issue. There's nostalgia attached. But I believe it's appropriate for us to take a position on the bridge because it appears to have much greater financial and other impacts to our community directly than the ferry, which seems to be a project of love, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, give us a deadline, whatever February agenda item. I wasn't there, so I'll read the report, look at the comments, but yeah, let's weigh in. But definitely, let's curb the conversation tonight because we have such a long agenda.
Actually, Councilor Height, get a hold of Gordon because he was there filming it, so you could watch the meeting that happened last night.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yeah. Like I said, I think Rick had sent out the PowerPoint that we got from the county. And what I can do, I'll talk with Kim about our agenda there in the first February one. I know I'm filling it quickly already. I know. But if you are going through it, and I know I have a bunch of questions, what I'll do is I'll collect those and I'll get those over to Clackamas County staff and at least have them answer them electronically, through email, and then that can help us in our conversation for the first piece in February. Councilor Parker, anything? Or?
Nothing constructive to add.
Okay. All right. All right, so we will read up, get me information. Our first meeting in February is, we have 3 or 5 Wednesdays this month? Yeah, I'm seeing.
First meeting in February would be the 6th.
Okay, so maybe, I know we've got a deadline of the 25th on, another deadline on the 25th for us to get information to me about our city manager position, but maybe the following week on that. Will that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Yep.
What's
So
the
February
date?
1st?
Sure, thank you. And again, end of day was fine on that, and my end of day is usually midnight, so we'll go from there. Okay, great. Thank you all. Council liaison report. So last meeting kind of talked about just coming to you all now that we're all here, except Councilor Dale. I'll fill him in. Just wanted to talk a little bit about council liaison and report. So the first piece, we received some feedback from constituents making sure, so if you can go back to your committees, if they're taking notes, to make sure that those notes get sent into Kim by the committee or board secretary so that we can get those uploaded to our website so people can look at the
minutes of each.
And you mean exclusively the city committees, not our ancillary appointments?
Right,
Yeah.
just the
So we
city
have-
committees, yes, not the ancillary ones. Thank you. And then regarding council and liaison reports kind of going forward, I'd like to get the council and myself move away from giving a rundown on our monthly calendars of things that we've done or been to, et cetera, unless it's pertinent to city business. And maybe there are people in the community that want to know that we went to, the chamber luncheon. I don't know. That's not generally, I think, that necessarily pertinent to liaison reports or what we're doing. Unless there was something pertinent that came out of the chamber luncheon that was, worthwhile and needed to be mentioned that you were there and heard. I just, again, kind of streamline our liaison reports.
For sake of time.
Have had in the past had a tendency to run long, so I'd like the time to be, like I said, to be about what we need to focus our efforts on or the efforts of our boards and committees. And then information I think that is important that maybe touch on in our reports. What are some of the goals for the year in the next year, next 5 and 10 years, if they're not looking at that, let's start encouraging them to do that, to start having that kind of looking ahead piece. I know that's, again, when our one-on-one conversations, more so with Councilor Parker, but I think with all of you, talking about just elevating our boards and our committees and trying to get them more engaged and more involved in the process, very similar to what we're doing with parks. You know, they're the ones holding the public input meeting, we're not. So just trying to kind of elevate those pieces of it. Find out from them what kind of support, or if there's support that they need from the council, you know, in one of the meetings, what can we do to help them, get them their information, or they need clarification on something. You know, they need input from the community, their board openings, any noteworthy items that you felt that needs to be brought back to us, possible recommendations that they might be working on that we need to be maybe brought up to speed on. And I know that some of our board pieces, like the school board and the Canby Adult Center, are not exactly, we're there because they're for more on an information piece and whatnot, so not, but there might be something that the school board is going to be tackling that might be worthwhile for us to be aware of, or at least communicate that being out there. Other pieces that you guys want to try to see from the boards and committees, or try to draw out as we move forward? Or is that like a good starting point?
Yeah, I mean, I express some interest to you privately about having more of a two-way dialogue with some of the committees, so it wasn't just us reporting back, but, you know, as a council, part of our job is to create and craft the vision for the community, and I think that all of our boards and us would benefit from more two-way conversation where we share our vision with them, so that what the work that they do in the committee is congruent with that. And I think opening the door two ways, which we seem to report more than converse. And I think that that conversing so our committees are effective and we're effective is a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, information sharing is good as long as, and we've had issue with a council or two in the past, and I'm not saying it's anybody currently sitting here, but just we're not active members of that board, though. Right. We don't make motions, we don't vote, we don't participate in deliberation. We're just there to answer questions and maybe, like I think what you're saying about kind of guiding them with what the city goals that we established at our goal setting session, letting them know if their ideas are kind of in line with what we've established.
Well, and I maybe I mischaracterized what I meant, but more like even once a year or periodically, having, whether the chair meets with the mayor or with the liaison or whatever, to share kind of how their committee fits into the broader vision that we've set for the city and the goals. Not that we direct meetings or even participate in the meetings. I don't think that's appropriate, but more at the 30,000 foot level, just making sure that the work that they're doing is consistent with the vision we have, and that if there are ways that their work can make our vision better, that we're aware of it, so that we can all do the best work instead of being, you know, two separate parts of the same body that don't ever communicate. Right. So yeah, so I don't mean in that we direct or like whatever.
It's happened in the past, so I just thought it was worth a mention.
Yeah, I mean more
we had a liaison actually make a motion at a committee meeting, which we can't do.
Yeah.
And I've even joked with the park advisory board about that I need to sometimes stay in my chair during our conversations, because
You get punchy at those
I do. I get a little punchy at the parks meetings.
And I think in our conversation, I was talking more like we asked them to come up with ideas, but sometimes we have ideas we don't share back. You know, and just really making that more fluid.
Yeah, sounds like our conversation last night. Yep. So perfect. All right. Well, we'll have more dialogue on this piece when we do our. Sorry, it's not a retreat, our day-long work session coming up. Last piece is, again, just a reminder on the 25th. For those of you that don't know, we are in the beginning stages of going out to recruit our new city manager position, because Rick has given us ample notice that he is retiring in October. So we're at the gathering information to round out the job description, job profile, so that we can get that to the recruiters that we may end up deciding to use to do this process. So again, that's the 25th for all of us to get that into me. All right, so that's concludes my piece. We'll move into councilor comments and liaison reports. Councilor Height,
Yes.
how are you?
Fine. So the Planning Commission, I did go to that on Monday night. Our citizen Patty Green gave a summary of it from her point of view. I was only there an hour. Apparently it went 3.5 hours. It was a long one, a lot of citizen input. It was unanimous. Project Shakespeare was approved. So it won't come to us, as you said, unless there was an appeal. But I could call or email Ms. Green to answer some questions, or we could, I want to make sure that she feels like she understands what the process was. So I'm happy to reach out if necessary. I don't know if she's still here or not, but yeah.
As long as it's process, be very careful,
Right.
again, because we're still in that window of...
Sure, in case it's appealed.
Yes, yeah. I just, again, just for all of you out here, that is, in the case of an appeal on something like land use, like what we're doing this evening, or a project like that, we then become acting in a very much a judicial body in that regards. And so any of that conversation, whatnot, that occurs outside of here can impact the proceedings of that hearing. So that's why I just caution all of us.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all.
Great, thank you. Councilor Parker?
Well, hi. Well, here's something interesting. The federal shutdown has affected one of our committees. The bread and butter grants that we use for our Historic Landmark Commission comes out of the Certified Local Government Fund, which is derivative of the National Park Service, which is closed. And the next round of grants, which the committee has used for just about all of its projects, for the brochures, the markers, and that type of thing, that next grant process opened today, but there's nobody at the office to ask about the process. So as a result, we're looking for money elsewhere. They're looking at a new local foundation called the Kinsman Foundation, which gives kind of micro grants, which really seems more in line with what the Historic Review Commission does. It's not huge projects, but smaller projects. So we have one of our members meeting with that foundation, and then finally on that, new officers were elected. Because he doesn't do enough around this city. Tony Crawford has been elected chair of the Historic Landmark Commission. And I think this is really cool. Jennifer Gillen, who is brand new to the committee, volunteered to be vice chair. And a number of us have talked about having a leadership track to get people in. And here's somebody in her first year in service that's going to be doing that. In terms of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, our chair did exactly what you suggested and sat down and said, what's the bigger vision? Where do you want us to go? What should we do? We've got energy. Let's have some focus. And I really am proud of Mindy for saying, what do you want us to do? So that's one thing. There was a meeting on December 11th, which I was out of town for that, so I did not get a chance to attend that. The next meeting is January 29th, and that will be here at City Hall. And that's it for my report.
Great, thank you, sir. Councilor Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of my liaison reports already been discussed. I already gave my position on the ferry and the goings-on, the meeting. But I did want to mention, I went to Salem for the swearing-in of Christine Drazen, and I wanted to congratulate her and thank her for her service to our district, and especially thank her for attending that meeting last night. She was already getting to work. She just got sworn in, and the session hasn't even officially begun, but she's already hard at work for our community, so I wanted to thank her for that. Traffic Safety Commission, trucks and speeding still seem to be the whole conversation right now, so that will continue. And finally, Suicide Prevention Task Force is still working with the school district to get some curriculum as early as 5th grade. So we're still working with them on that, and I'll let you know how that progresses.
Great.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Dalrymple.
Thank you very much. This is my first official liaison report, so I'm excited that I actually have something besides, having been sworn in 3 minutes before my last one. I have something to report. Library board meeting last night. I have big shoes to fill. They miss you and they love you, and I am up for the challenge, but bring greetings from them to you.
You're not Tracy.
I am not. I'm not. We have our first high school board member, which is something that they've been looking for. They wanted to bring a high school board member in, as well as 2 people from outside of the city boundary. And so they have an application for 1 person outside of the city boundary, so that's great. And I should just say that welcome to Meridian Ladig from Cambia High School. She's a sophomore and wants to serve on the board through her whole high school career, so that's exciting. The teen room is getting lots of use. That's great. They are doing 3 teen programs each week at this point, and they're having about 20 to 25 kids per program, so that's great news as well. The fire board has not met yet since I've been on the council here, so I'm looking forward to that next week. But I will say that they did a burn to learn last week. If any of you saw a big cloud of black smoke coming from over by the fire department, that was them doing a controlled burn of a house across the street, where they did a lot of training, and they have learned a lot of stuff. So I'm excited to hear what they learned from that. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Spoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't have any liaison meetings between last meeting and this meeting, but I do want to take a second, since you started, and address a little bit about the invocation. And those of you that know me know that I usually just speak off the cuff, but when I have something that's important to say, I always write it down. So I had never heard of Rajad Zed until he emailed the city and requested to give invocation at tonight's meeting. I used my Google foo skills when he did, and I wanted to take a second to tell you guys a little bit about who he is and why it was an honor to have him give invocation for us. Rajan Zed is a distinguished religious statesman. He is regarded with such esteem that he was invited to be the guest chaplain that gave the groundbreaking first Hindu prayer to the United States Senate. And he's been invited by European governments as part of interfaith dialogues. He is president of the Universal Society of Hinduism and an interfaith ambassador for the Nevada Clergy Association. He is on multiple other boards and holds leadership positions in many organizations for the interfaith community. In addition to giving the first Hindu prayer at the United States Senate, he has given the official invocation for the United States House of Representatives and in at least 16 different state houses, senates, and assemblies, along with multiple county commission boards and city councils across the country. The invocation for public meeting in this room started, or I guess it was the other room, started in about 2015. And over time, we've had some conversations where I or some other people have urged the mayor to consider opening up the invocation to be inclusive of Christian invocations, but also faiths, other faiths, in addition to secular invocations. I'm embarrassed for our city tonight that we failed to be a gracious host. And while raised in a Christian house myself, I am honored to be present for an interfaith invocation that reaffirms the statement this body made in 2016 about being an inclusive and welcoming community, which reads in part, "Us not picking or choosing who is included will be our true test and will ultimately define how we grow and prosper as a community." We very nearly wasted a unique opportunity to welcome a world-renowned religious leader. If our commitment to inclusion, the Constitution, and diversity is real, it should not have been difficult for your representatives to allow this man to come and give invocation for us. I support the existence of our official invocation, but outright object to the exclusion of other faiths to issue the official invocation at our city council meetings, which has been our practice. 5 hours is not sufficient notice to have equitably offered an opportunity to a person of a different faith, particularly when the twice denied initial request was made 9 days earlier. I appreciate and respect that the mayor wants to take time to center himself and pray for leaders, and I think that we should all take time to center ourselves before the meeting so that we can bring our best self to this room. While prayer is a personal thing, invocation is ceremonial. A prayer can always exist whether it's the invocation or not, but if the invocation is going to be an official agenda item, it should be inclusive. Now, I look forward to this being the dawn of an open and inclusive invocation, and I look forward to hearing from community members, faith leaders in the future, perhaps even without requiring that they share the time with anyone else, as we work to make sure that the elected officials in front of you fairly and adequately represent all members of our community, even the ones who share a different worldview or faith than we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Spoon. Is there any other comments?
No, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
We will move into the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the minutes of the January 2nd, 2019 City Council meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Parker to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes of the January 2nd, 2019 City Council regular meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 5-0. We will move into our public hearing this evening. The public hearing is regarding annexation 18-05 and zone change 18-06 North Holly and adoption of proposed North Holly Street Development Concept Plan. I will launch into my annexation hearing procedure. The matter before the City Council is a request to annex property into the City of Canby. Canby Municipal Code Section 16.84.050 requires the Council to conduct a public hearing to evaluate the proposed annexation application and determine the appropriate zoning designation upon annexation. This matter requires a public hearing, and all interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this application, please fill out a yellow card, as many of you have done, fill out a yellow public testimony card. At the appropriate time, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. Those people interested in testifying, please indicate that desire by raising your hand at this time. So those of you that filled out yellow cards, hands up. I have more than 2 cards.
That was quick.
All right. I've got 4 hands and 1 on the way. All right. You may be limited by time for your presentation. The applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be allowed 3 minutes each, and the opponents will be allowed 3 minutes each. And then the applicant will have 10 minutes for rebuttal. Testimony and evidence must be directed to the applicable criteria listed in the staff report or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulations which you believe applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements of evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. All questions will be directed through the mayor. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. Conflicts of interest. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Councilor Height?
No conflict, plan to participate?
Councilor Parker?
No conflict. Plan to participate.
Councilor Hensley?
No conflict, I'll participate.
Councilor Varwig?
I have no conflict. However, I was part of the Planning Commission when this was brought before the Planning Commission. I did not participate at the Planning Commission, and I will participate tonight.
Great, thank you for that.
And just to be clear, you had recused yourself so that you weren't a part of the decision on below, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a fair and new vote that you've never done before?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Spoon?
I have no conflicts, and I plan to participate.
I have also no conflicts and will plan on participating. Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Councilor Height?
I live practically across the street from this area, and I did attend the community meeting that Stafford held back in, this summer. So, yeah, but I can be fair and just, and I plan to participate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor Parker?
No ex parte contact.
Thank you. Councilor Hensley?
No ex parte contact. I did attend the neighborhood meeting, though, so I don't know if that counts as ex parte contact. It was, but I didn't participate in the meeting. I just was listening to the neighbors.
And whatever you heard, are you just going to put that aside and listen tonight and make your decision based on what the public sees you see?
Indeed.
Perfect.
Councilor Varwig?
This may have been the more appropriate place to say that I was on the planning commission at the time. That's the only contact that I
Nope. Perfect. Thank you. It always helps to cover both bases.
Correct.
Consider yourself double covered.
Yep.
I am covered.
And Councilor Spoon?
No ex parte contact, with the exception of I periodically drive by the site and have seen people post about the issue on Facebook, but I don't, once I realize that they're posting about it, don't even read it. What I have taken in, I'm able to set aside.
Okay. I have had no ex parte contact. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any councilor or the mayor regarding ex parte contact or conflicts of interest? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. We will have the staff report, questions of staff by the hearing body, open public hearing for testimony, or I will open public hearing for testimony. We'll have the applicant, the proponents, opponents, and then rebuttal. I will then close public testimony. Questions, if any, by the hearing body, and then discussion by hearing body. A decision shall be made by the council at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to date certain in the future for further action by this body. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. The City Council's decision regarding the annexation application is final and will be reflected with the first and second reading of the associated annexation ordinance. Does anyone have any questions of the procedures of this hearing?
No.
Nope. All right. Mr. Brown, good evening.
Good evening to you, and thank you very much. And I'll get started here. An annexation, we have an annexation ordinance in 1689 of our land development and planning ordinance. Tells us the review process and procedures. There's a map in that section of the code that defines areas that are subject to a development, a concept plan being approved before any individual property within that defined area can be annexed through the review process and the final decision by the City Council. So the annexation that we have tonight does involve 9 different parcels that are located within one of those defined development concept planning areas. So you're not just looking at the annexation and the corresponding zone district that would be put in place for that property if annexed, but also to approve the concept development plan that's being proposed tonight. The entire area in that concept development plan is shown on our comprehensive plan to be for future low-density residential development. The entire development concept area. The 9 lots that are proposed to be annexed are just on the east side of Holly Street over towards Locust Street. Here's a map that shows in the blue hatched area where the 9 tax lots are that end up being 47.647 acres, including right-of-ways that include half of North Holly Street, half of Northeast 22nd Avenue to the north, and all of Locust Street to the east side, and all of the right-of-way of Territorial Road on the little edge down here where it touches Territorial Road, where it's proposing to be annexed. The red on this map, the dashed red line, is the urban growth boundary line. And it's worth noting that this section of what looks like Canby is outside of the urban growth boundary and outside of the city limits, and so is not part of our urban growth boundary. So you're not likely to see that area develop anytime soon. There's the map in our annexation ordinance. So up at the top where it says Holly DCP area, so that's 57 acres if you include the area on the west side of Holly Street as well, which is not what we're looking at today, except for the fact the entire development concept plan does apply over on that side too. So you should note in the packet the information that showed even a street pattern for some of those lots on that side, because that's we're looking at, can we adequately serve the entire area, not just the 9 tax lots that we're looking at. There's an aerial that shows you what's out there today, and there is at least 2 houses and another structure that may be a 3rd house. It's also labeled on here, I don't know if you can read it at this scale, but this is our 2.3 acre future city park that we've had for many years here when this neighboring development agreed to dedicate some parkland rather than being in their development. They dedicated parkland on adjacent property. And since it's being surrounded by the other participants in this annexation application, it made logical sense that the city become a part of this application. So I wanted to make sure you were aware that we are a part of it. Just another view looking at the tract that's actually being annexed, which is over here on this side of Holly. This gives you a quick overview of the 9 tax lots and who owns those tax lots, what their size are, and the one that's probably most important in here is the very first one, which is 19.32 acres, which is the Stafford Land Development is behind all the work and effort towards this and coordinating the annexation, and has several property owners that have gone in with them at this time. But they're the ones that are currently have a plan and a contractual arrangement on this particular parcel to follow up, if annexed, with a development, probably a fairly soon time frame. So the entire 43 acres of private property here that's proposed for annexation, that's the only parcel that's currently planning a development that we know of. We've even heard specifically from the Montecuco property owners that are part of this that they continue to plan to continue farming for quite some time their property, but thought this was a good time for them to participate in this application. Down below here, there's a list of the streets that I mentioned. This total acreage down here has actually been amended since they've had a survey done and an accurate legal description of what's being annexed now that's attached to the ordinance that's on the agenda tonight, should you need to get to that. This slide kind of identifies each of those ownerships on the map and where they exist. I think you had that in your packet as well. This is what would be probably one of the most important maps that's illustrating the development concept plan that we're just calling the North Holly Development Concept Plan. And as I said, looking on both sides of Holly, including over here, what they've done on this one, since you guys are becoming experts on annexations and development plans, this one has a street circulation plan. And so by approving this development concept plan, you would be saying in a conceptual manner, here's a logical way to develop this in the future. But they didn't go into the detail of showing individual lots. As we all know, that can actually lead to some other issues. And so they've chosen not to go into that much detail, which staff thought was just fine, because we really don't want to tie their hands at this stage on the conceptual level exactly what size and how many exact lots there will be. Somewhere in the application, they've indicated, and I'm trying to look here, the entire development concept plan area has a potential for about 240 R1 low-density size lots. Quite a few less just for the 19.32 acre that's currently contemplated for follow-up with possible development at this time. Along with that development concept plan is evaluating that we have adequate infrastructure to serve the entire development concept plan area. And they've demonstrated very well and very easily on this portion of town how services for sanitary and water are easily able to serve this. And I kind of emphasize that in this particular area, there's no need for what we found out with the extensive traffic study that was performed and the fact that there's no need for additional capital projects like pump stations, all gravity fed, easy to serve this particular area with extensions. All development would be constructed by future developers that would be building the potential tax lots that might get annexed. This particular one has some red lines on there, which are higher diameter pipes than the blue lines that you see on the map. So they took that into account as well. I might just point out as an anecdote that when they started their process and held neighborhood meetings and such, staff wanted to know that the streets and the pipes that they were showing on the west side of Holly made some logical sense, which was very difficult for them to do because we're talking about one tax lot width fronting on that street when there's potential development on westward in the future. And they're showing a street that might go through one of these properties that abuts to property that's outside of our urban growth boundary. So they did some study over in this area to help convince us and them that where they put the circulation streets on the west side of Holly would make some logical sense through those properties. Boy, that got the neighbors excited. What are you planning for? Are you going to develop outside the urban growth boundary? And so they quickly got rid of that information after the first meeting because it was misleading in some way to the citizens because they didn't understand why they were showing that. It was to help us get a good concept plan so that we thought it was a reasonable one that we could hang our hat on if you were to approve that. In the criteria for review, as you know, the second review criteria, and the other one I talked about that's really important, is adequate infrastructure going to be available to serve what we're proposing to annex. But the other one has to do with the land needs analysis, and that's because there is a review criteria that says that consideration during annexations is to assure that we have at least a 3-year land supply. It doesn't actually say there's any problem with having more, but it does say that's what we should be looking at. And if someone can demonstrate that there's less than a 3-year supply, then that's good reason for you to approve additional annexations. If we have more than a 3-year supply, then that's something for you to look at maybe in another light, depending on the particulars of the particular property, what zone is being annexed, what supply do we have in a particular zoning district versus just all residential land. And so the applicant has done an analysis related to that in the packet. And part of what his analysis did is base the idea of supply on not what staff has done on a very easy level at some times is just what is our consumption rate in the past 10 years been. And we've thrown out in previous annexations meetings here that if you go back 10 years, we've been issuing about 45 home permits on average a year. The past 3 years, that's jumped up to about 65 lots on average. For the 3 years, we're anticipating that that's going to be quite a bit higher in the next 2 years. And that's based upon, which you're probably aware of, we've approved a lot of plats recently, not just the annexations, but some of the plats that go with those. And there's been a couple that were already annexed into the city that now have come forward as approved plats. So with the analysis that the applicant did, they did indicate very clearly, I think someone asked me at the previous annexation meeting, that, see if I don't get this right, I'll let Levi clear this up. But at the time they prepared their narrative, it's changing every day. We had 91 total residential lots available, vacant lots, platted lots, full infrastructure, ready to go for somebody to build a house on. Based upon the population projection for the next 3 years, the applicants indicated, and we support that conclusion, maybe it's in a chart, that we needed 300 and some lots. And if you took the analysis that they came up with on how many homes would be needed to serve the expected population that Canby would have in the next 3 years, they came out indicating that we definitely are short because we'd have about 17 individual lots left. And so we're short on R1 zoned lots. If you're analyzing by platted lots, we're way short. We're going to run out very quickly. If you add the potential lots that could be platted by subdivisions that have been approved already, then we have a much greater supply, and they indicated in their analysis that that's, if all of those plats follow the normal 2 to 3 year process to put the infrastructure in the ground and record a plat of record so the lots are for sale, that by the end of 2019, this year, we'll reach a peak, and then we'll reach another peak the following 1 year later. And both of those peaks are just below the 3 year land supply. They're right at it. And that's based upon their using the Portland Research population projection for Canby and how many 2-point people per household. I think using 68-point-something% of all housing units would be single-family detached, the other 30% apartments, etc. So they used all of that analysis, and you wanted to know, it says it's going to be just below the 3 year supply. And as I said, that's a minimum we should be looking at. We can always do more. The Planning Commission reviewed this on December 10th. They voted 3-3. It was obvious that any other motion was still going to be 3-3. So in effect, they denied this annexation request. And so you have from the Planning Commission recommendation for denial of this application. But I wanted you to understand a 3-3 tie vote type denial. We put in your the council memo to help you focus that there was a staff recommendation for approval of this annexation, and we've provided on this slide here in your memorandum an alternative option to their recommendation for denial is to approve the annexation zone change, direct staff to complete the boundary change process through the state and county, et cetera, And upon annexation, you would assign the R1 zone to the 9 tax lots proposed for annexation, and that the proposed North Holly Development Concept Plan is represented in the applicant's submittal and drawings. 3 of those drawings are shown here tonight, and their narrative explaining that you would be adopting that plan, recognizing that that's necessary before you can actually annex any individual property. Are there any questions about this application?
I'm sure there's probably quite a few, Brian. I'll start with Councilor Hyde. Any questions, Councilor?
I mean, it's always, I tend to like to ask my questions after the developer presents, because a lot of times they actually answer my questions, so
Okay.
I'll hold off.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Councilor Parker, any questions for Mr. Brown? Councilor Hensley?
Not at this time.
Just for clarification, we're talking about zone change and annexation, not the subdevelopment itself.
That's right. There is no associated actual development plan at this time. If they decide that they are going to do that, they'll be following up with that. And I did remember one other thing I wanted to clarify. In the memorandum that I prepared for you, the last paragraph of it talked about the traffic studies. And I want to make it clear that at the time that that memorandum was done, we didn't have all the information we have now. It talks about the fact that they chose to have their own traffic study done by their own chosen engineer. When that's done, our ordinance says we have an independent peer review done by our traffic engineers, which are DKS. They did that. They indicated that there was a few tasks that they wanted them to, that weren't provided in the initial traffic study, which is actually what's posted online for everybody to see right now. So they had started work even before the Planning Commission on further traffic analysis at a subdivision level, and those were the kind of missing items that we had actually placed in that scope of work. They completed that study, they submitted it to us, and then I had DKS look at the results, and they said they nailed it. They provided all the missing data, and they said very clearly that that did not change any of the recommendations or any of the results of the study that everyone has had and has been reviewing. So I wanted to make sure you realize that all the questions staff had or the Planning Commission had have been resolved, and there's no change in what the recommendations were in that original plan, traffic study that was done.
Brian, I'm going to ask, I think the obvious question, or an obvious question, in that, why was this voted down? Because everything I read states that they met the pieces that needed to be done.
So the best thing, if you really want that, is you have a draft of the written findings for the Planning Commission.
I
And they
know.
give those 2 reasons, basically, are listed in their findings. And they were
I know. It's
the
somewhat-
land needs issue, and they were traffic issues. And
It was more of a rhetorical, sorry,
Okay.
Brian, more of a tongue-in-cheek question, kind of the piece of, to me, it seemed like those were not egregious enough to necessarily turn it down.
And that's certainly, that's why it's
That's
in
why it's
front of
here.
you now,
I know.
to
Okay.
make that determination
Okay.
and such. And I guess I'd rather not get in the middle of that.
No, and I-
Other than, I already pointed out, staff recommended approval.
And I don't want to put you in the middle because you're, yes.
I mean, my job is to tell you what the Planning Commission's recommended at this point, but I did indicate that, hey, there's an alternative option here.
Well, and you told us exactly what that you needed to. All right, thank you. It sounds like we have no questions for you right now.
Okay.
As always, stay tuned, because I'm sure that we will. And we'll turn it, we'll get staff from Land Company up here in the hot seat. All right, so I will officially open up the public hearing for testimony here. So we will hear from Mr. Levi, the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. My name is Levi Lavasa. I work for Stafford Development Company, and we are located at 8840 Southwest Holly Lane, Wilsonville, Oregon, 97070.
Hello, Mayor, Council. My name is Gordon Root. I'm one of the principals at Stafford Development Company, and hopefully we're going to get the presentation up here, huh? Yeah. Better that they're running it than me. Anyway, so I wanted to go through briefly, I mean, while some know us in the room, I wanted to go through and just briefly talk a little bit about who we are. We're Stafford Development Company. Like I said, we're located here in just north of here in Wilsonville now. We're an award-winning local developer and home builder, and I think that's very important as we are local homegrown. We have 23 employees. We manage managers. It's myself and Rick Wabel are the principals. Project manager, of course, Levi Labasa. So where do we work? We work in the small communities all around. Forest Grove, Dundee, Tigard, McMinnville, Salem, Woodburn, Mount Angel, Dallas, Canby, obviously, State and Malala, Estacada. So we do build various communities. We've been building here in Canby for quite some time as well. We always focus on the ABCs of housing, attainability, balance, and choice. And we do that by developing communities with different housing types and lot sizes. This is different in that the entire thing is zoned R1, and there is, as Brian pointed out, an acute shortage of R1 zone properties that are inside and developable within Canby now. We build very high performance homes that are energy efficient. That's kind of our landmark, as we focus on energy efficiency. We're innovators in small lot developments where those are included. We do large lot subdivisions all the way up to acreage lots as well. We do build spec homes. We're not really a custom home builder. And we really focus on the durability of the home long term, what it is, built to last communities. And we do make finished lots available to other builders. You'll see that we build and sell lots, and we think that's important to keep a diversity within the community and the local builders alive as well. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project or the proposal that is before you tonight. So thank you for having us. Look forward to sharing this with you again for a couple of you that were at the neighborhood meeting. So tonight what this comes down to is a proposed annexation where this all starts. And as you can see in the attached exhibit map, this is actually 47.647 total acres, 9 tax lots that make up the majority of that, and 4 rights-of-way or portions of rights-of-way that make up just under 4 acres. So I think the big question would be, how did we get to 9 tax lots? And this is really the result of some of the requirements that come up in the annexation criteria, which include a neighborhood meeting. So these are all kind of a bullet point brief summary of the annexation criteria that I think stand out mostly and that are typically warrant more conversation. And so how we got to this the 9 tax lots was we had a neighborhood meeting where we go and explain our development concept plan and invite other neighbors to join. So we had a 19.32 acre parcel that we started with that you saw in the earlier maps, and just like we've done in the past and is customary in Canby, you invite the neighbors to join the process because it's more efficient for them, it saves them time, we're already doing the work, so it actually ends up being a big cost savings as well. And so that's what we did here. We ended up including several other tax lots, including the city's future park. And so that's how this grew so quickly. I think at the neighborhood meeting it was still just the 19.32, and then when we had the follow-up meeting, it grew with some additional neighbors wanting to join the process. So first, the annexation also requires a zone change. The zone change is technically a zoning map amendment, and we are doing that, as Brian stated, in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which designates this as low-density residential, and which transfers directly to R1, which is low-density housing in the city of Canby, the biggest lots that you can build in Canby, which are 7,000 to 10,000 square feet. So also with the annexation and prior to the annexation, a DCP must be approved, as Brian had described, and that is what we are talking about today. But first, just to address the annexation portion of this, I wanted to go over the lands needs analysis really quickly. I know Brian already touched on this, so I'll try to be brief and just explain how we got to such a high number for what is actually deficient in the city of Canby. So I think last time we were here, almost everybody, all of you were here last year when we talked about the Southwest Canby Development Concept Plan. I think Councilor Barwig, you were on the Planning Commission at the time. And very similar approach. Not much has changed. We took the projections that the city of Canby uses for their comprehensive plans, or for their master plans, in this case the storm sewer master plan. Years 2020 and 2025 are the ones that we take account for. The low range in the estimates for the metro forecast, which the city typically uses, have really high numbers. If you look at 2010, 2015, those aren't lining up with what the Canby population estimate is from the Portland Research Center. So in the top left table, you see the metro forecast. If you look at 2015, it says 17,998 is their low estimate. Measured in Canby, 16,010. So they're off. And rather than assume a really high number and come up with what would be an even more drastic shortage if I kept those numbers, I think it makes more sense to try and be realistic about it and reduce the actual projection, since Portland State does not provide them. So we have to use what the metro forecast shows. So I reduced it down 88%. So 2020, we're going to have just over 18,000 based on a similar ratio. 2025, almost 2,500. So using those population estimates, trying to bring the number down to a realistic growth rate for the city of Canby, we need to address future housing needs. And this same slide that Brian showed ends up showing that based on a countywide average of 68.7% of all housing being single-family residential, it should be noted it's actually higher in Canby, but is probably trending towards a more balanced multifamily versus single family. But if we use the county number, 68.7, then 342 of the new housing units needed over the next 3 years are going to be single-family residential lots. And like Brian said, we end up with 91 available single-family residential lots, and all but 17 of those are actually in R1.5 zoning. And the criteria in the annexation code for the city actually says that for your specific zoning, so for R1 in this case, you need to show what the deficiency is. But that's not easy to analyze when there's two types of housing that you pull permits for. It's just a single-family residential permit that you pull, so putting them together kind of gives you a better picture, and hopefully it's obvious itself that there's a shortage of SFR housing, 251 to be specific. And then to take it to another level, I think it's already fairly obvious, but just to take it to the next level, we looked at some of the future developments. And I apologize to some of the owners in the audience. I put up some properties that I know you don't plan to develop, but I'm representing a really aggressive development schedule of properties that are included in this annexation. And probably won't happen like this. It'll probably be less, but even if it did happen like this, and you compare it to past lot absorption, which per plat, every plat, a new building permit is pulled every 22 days. And that's an average over all the plats that have recorded since 2010. Every 22 days, on average, a building permit is pulled on each plat. So that ends up giving you over time, so this is actual right here. This isn't a projection. In the past, this is the lot inventory for the city of Canby from 2014 to 2018. And using that same absorption rate, if we project it from 2018 to 2021, the orange line shows you the ceiling, the 3-year single-family lot supply. The blue line shows where it actually would probably end up being. And so that gap that Brian talked about is actually 116 lots. There will never be less than a 116 lot deficiency of SFR lots in the city of Canby. And that's probably more information than you wanted to hear, but I figured I'd go over it. And now just getting into the actual North Hawley DCP. talked a little bit about the neighborhood meeting, and we'll just jump straight into the annexation and the DCP portion of this. So in our drawings, I know Brian showed you these. The blue line is the DCP boundary, red line is the annexation area. In planning for this development concept plan, looking at the existing conditions, noting the topography, the location of existing services, we have to start with sewer, which I did not start with here, starting with the sewer plan. So we have to see which way that we're going to send sewage and ultimately make sure that this can be served all the way to the extent of the DCP boundary. And we were able to find an efficient way of doing that and matching that up with the water lines, which water is much easier to deal with, pressurized, but sewer needs to go downhill. And so like Brian talked about, here is our circulation plan. And I think this is a good time to talk about transportation, which ended up being a really big issue at the Planning Commission hearing, because people don't always believe traffic studies, but that's something that both us and the city have to rely on our consultants, that are professionals in the field, to make recommendations and then make our decisions the best we can based on those recommendations. And our traffic engineer, who's here to answer more technical questions if needed, but they found that in 2028, or at full build out of the entire DCP area, the one warrant for additional improvements beyond the standard is a left turn lane eastbound on Territorial onto Locust Street. So if you're driving on Territorial and you want to turn onto Locust, they say in 2028, by then there should be a pocket lane. And I think that's a very reasonable improvement. That should be the developer's burden. And that's what would be the case for any future development. And again, I want to make sure that we emphasize that there is no subdivision application being proposed right now. This is a master plan that we want to be a guiding document for future development, including ones that we plan to do, specifically on the Dodds property in multiple phases over the next several years. But this road layout, if you look at it closely, you can see that we actually followed a lot of property lines. And that's not always the case when it comes to master planning. I don't know if you guys remember the North Redwood master planning process. It's really hard to follow property lines and make everybody be able to develop independently. And that's what we did here for the most part, especially east of Holly Street. When you get on the west side, much smaller lots, the urban growth boundaries coming up against it, and it makes it a lot harder to follow lot lines. But even there, we did a pretty good job of making it so people could develop independently from one another in the future, or continue farming indefinitely, which is the case in some cases. So just really quick on the comprehensive plan, I think this is an important element of the decision process and making sure that we're addressing the many elements that the comprehensive plan brings up. And I think the reason I want to bring it up is because I think this project and really this process does a lot to enhance the comprehensive plan, the goals and policies that they have in place. Specifically, the urban growth element talks about using land efficiently and making sure you set a boundary. So the urban growth boundary, the comp plan, zoning map, obviously all incorporate this, but it makes so that this development process, where we're planning it ahead of time before a subdivision comes in, is going to be really efficient. It's not going to be a wasted land. You're not going to have weird lot shapes that don't end up allowing for the maximum use of the land that's being used. Land use element, environmental concerns element, we talked a little bit at the neighborhood meeting, and it comes up a lot, is the soil types. And I think, actually, let's go to this. So we talked about soil types. In Canby, if you look at the soils map, and this is from the Canby Comprehensive Plan, there are really two types of soil in Canby. There's good and great, right? So the comprehensive plan specifically says that you should develop the property that has the lowest classification of soils. The only developable land in the city of Canby that is left is Class 1 or Class 2 soils. The other two DCP areas being on the east side of 99 and then being down east of Ivy Street are both Class 1 soil types. This along with the property off Birch, I believe it is are the only two Class 2 soil types left of buildable land in the city of Canby. And beyond that, this area has been identified since 1984 in the comprehensive plan as a priority A growth area. There are priority B and C growth areas that have already been brought into the city that have already developed, and this one is priority A. So I know I'm running up against time here, and if we could have a couple more minutes, I'm going to pass on some future subdivision talk about what happens next.
Can we get 2 more minutes? We're pretty quick.
Council,
Sure.
go for it then, 2 more minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so what's very important about this is the future subdivisions will all come back before your decision-making bodies. And everyone has to apply for the subdivision. You guys know the process: planning review, detailed design conforms to the adopted DCPs, your pre-app with the city, neighborhood meeting, review the application, public hearings before the planning commission, possibly city council. Then we move into engineering, complete the detailed engineering drawings, pre-construction meeting, plan revisions, engineering approval. Then we get to construction and building. I go through this because that's a 30-month process. There's no question about it. This is a phased project. You go through all the engineering approval, final plat approval after engineering, after you do the construction, and then you get to your home permitting, construction, etc. This is 3 to 4 years out before we actually have homes there, and it's just a fulfillment of your long-term planning effort, inclusion within the boundary, of course, since 1984, and a class, the #1 area, soils types. This is very important. In the DCP area, even though we're going to come in with a proposal for less than half of what it is, it's important I think for everyone to understand that system development charges are exactly that. That generates the money to make improvements within the city overall. So if you look at a total of 240 possible units in the DCP area, you've got $1,300,000 additional for parks, $806,000 for your transportation, $667,000 for sanitary, stormwater is $58,000, school construction excise tax is additional $528,000, water SDCs $946,000, and water meter hookups are another $1,900,000. So it's $6,260,000, which is controlled by this body on your CIP list. What you do with that money and where you put those monies in there. I think that people, and this is over and above the improvements that we or others, when we develop, are required to make specific improvements that we give to the city for infrastructure. This is beyond that. So it will pay big dividends to the city, it will pay its way, and you control ultimately how that money's spent.
Questions?
Questions at all for that at this time?
I do. The soil classification, Class 1, we're assuming is superior?
Yes.
Just making sure.
Sorry, yes. Class
Okay.
1 is superior.
Okay. How does a city go about actually preserving soils?
So,
how does that work? Go ahead.
So the urban growth boundary is really what that does, is it preserves the growth of the urban center, and I think that's why it was implemented in the 70s, is just to try and avoid sprawl and try and keep the urban centers to a certain area until you needed to expand to accommodate growth. And I think that's why this has been in the urban growth boundary for so long, though, anticipating that there would be a need for this growth in the future. And so that's since 1984 is quite a long time. So not as fast as they might have thought, but time's coming.
The other piece of that too, Councilor Hyde, is the urban and rural reserve conversation that occurred 10 years ago, 12 years ago. That's also plays into reserving some of that farmland, the supreme Class 1. Yeah. And so some of North Canby was left undesignated so that it could go development-wise either way. It could be left farming or it could become housing. And that's outside the UGB right now, our urban growth boundary right now. Okay. So that's something that potentially down the road that we're going to be having to take a look at. A council will need to look at in terms of, what will it take to expand the urban growth boundary and where.
Okay. Yeah.
Any questions for staff group here?
I do about the street design, actually. Yeah. Did you guys you didn't want through streets, it looks like, east to west? Was that to slow down the neighborhood traffic?
Yeah.
That was the idea? Because they're kind of,
Yes. So our, I should have brought this up. So development's concept planning is really an iterative process for us. You try one time, you see what somebody says about it, and you fix it, change it. And going into the pre-application meeting, we had those streets going straight through in some cases, and we got feedback that said we don't want those streets to go straight through. It's a speed concern, it's a safety concern, so if you can offset them, it'll make it for a more pedestrian-friendly experience, or at least not as much speeding going on. So we adjusted the plan accordingly, and that's what you're seeing now. Well, plus some changes after the neighborhood meeting. So.
Okay. Yeah. Can I keep asking questions? Do you mind, Mr.
No,
I'll just-
if you've got them
I
of the
do.
applicant, then yes, please
Yeah.
do.
So those lots, there's a lot of unplatted, though annexed lots in Canby. What are the chances for more, like several to come online all at once? You said it's like an average of every, 22 days something gets platted? Is that
So that is, a building permit is pulled every 22 days on average in any given plat.
Okay.
So if we recorded a plat somewhere, on average, a builder, or us as the builder, we would probably pull a building permit every 22 days in that specific plat. But plat recording and building permits are different. So plat recording takes a lot longer. Building permit reviews are quick. It's usually one time, maybe a revision, but plat recording actually is the subdivision process. So so in Southwest Canby, if we annexed the property, we had to come back in for a subdivision hearing and go through that whole process. And then, like we talked about at the end here, you have to go back through the engineering review, planning commission engineering review, and then you have to go through reviews with the county a lot of times, because sometimes there's county roads. In this case, future development along Holly Street would have to coordinate with the county, in part because it's half county road after this, if the annexation at the midline was approved. So plat recording takes a lot longer. But even if there were, in terms of land needs, I don't know if that was the base of your question, if there were a lot that recorded really fast, there is a 116 lot deficiency in that future projection that I did for kind of illustrative purposes. 116 lot deficiency at its best. Brian was mentioning that it gets close, and 116 is the closest it got. So there's still room for additional subdivisions I didn't account for, so right here, if you look at this point right here, there is a gap. This is inventory in blue, and then orange is the 3-year supply, and that's a 116 lot gap there. And everywhere else, that gap is bigger. So there's a lot of room for other projects to develop. There's not a lot of huge development areas left. I think there's 3 other DCP areas left in Canby other than this one.
Councilor Height, can I join you on that question? Because I had some questions just about how you guys calculated land supply too, as long as we're on the topic.
Yeah.
So
You want to go back?
That's the one I'm looking for, but you had another one too. So that was the past lot, the future development. Okay.
Yes.
It kind of went fast, and so this
Yes,
accounts
sorry.
for clarity's sake, this accounts for annexations that have not been proposed subdivisions.
Correct.
No. Yeah, he's saying no, and you're saying
so
yes.
Some of those are, these are.
It's both.
Been approved and potential, so these are both.
It's both,
So we've
okay.
taken into account those that have been approved, that are underway, or, in some sort of process, and those that could be proposed.
Yes, so if you look here, I have Dodds Phase 1. That's tonight. Cutsforth, that was a recently approved annexation. Hemmerling, that's part of the property tonight. McMartin Phase 2 and 3, that's a subdivision, that's multiple phase that you guys approved, or the Planning Commission approved semi-recently, and I have no idea what their plans are, or if they can build Phase 1 and then try and get to these that quickly. So this is really just to try and show, based on normal turnaround times, which I was trying to assume here, plus a little bit more aggressive, what it might look like in 3 years. And the Burkharts and Montecukos are here, and they don't want to develop. They have no plans to develop. So I'm just, in case something changed, I just added them in there.
So the calculation that you had indicates that even if all these popped at the same time, even if all of them popped, that you calculate still a what deficiency?
If they popped at these times, because I just happen to know the process for some of them.
Sometimes it just couldn't happen quicker, even if they started now.
Right. So, yes. So this,
okay,
at any given time, is just show based on the
I hope that
past
wasn't
trends.
redundant. I just wanted to make sure I understood the calculation process.
I think it's key to understand that we brought the population forecast down and put everything we could in possible subdivision approvals. I mean, we know that we were going to have this conversation and we have to stay here in front of you with strong credibility. So we did bring population forecast down and brought lot inventory up to its maximum. And you still have a shortfall, particularly of R1 lots. There's only 17.
Thank you.
Councilor Hyde, any?
Not for these guys. I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah.
Thanks.
So we'll move into public testimony and comment. First one is Susan Myers. So we're talking proponents to this project and annexation. Hi, Susie. How are you?
Hello. I'm Susan Myers. I live at 1590 North Ponderosa Street, and this evening I'm here speaking on behalf of Monacuco Rentals. We're one of the applicants. As was mentioned previously, we are annexing at this time for certainty for our family in the future. We plan to continue to farm as for a period of time. We cannot say for certain, but it would be somewhere between 5 and 15 years. And the cause for us to develop is not something that has any certainty. So it's really based on taxes, inheritance, that kind of thing. So, but we do appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this application. And a lot of what I was going to talk about has already been mentioned. This has been a high priority area. It has been in the UGB for a long time. We do appreciate, to answer a question from your January 2nd meeting, wondering about whether other people appreciate being in a DCP. We did even before we were part of the application, because they did the design. We were able to take it to our engineers and see, is this what we want? We had the opportunity to make some tweaks, and eventually we ended up joining the application. One point I want to mention is, just to get it on tonight's record, that we do appreciate Planning Commission clarifying that we would be able to keep our well. It does irrigate ag land to the north. The city engineer, in their report of this annexation, responded as if it was a development and made the blanket statement that any wells needed to be abandoned in accordance with Oregon law. Well, we would retain our well until, and even when we develop, and keep it on one lot, much like the Simnets have done, and then when it's time to decommission it, we would do it in accordance with Oregon law. The other thing I wanted to mention is Canby's future residential growth, and Brian Brown can speak to this, is slated to move to the north of Canby, because industrial land will move to the east, and eventually Canby residentially will need to move to the north. This has been in the UGB for a long time. It has been a high priority area for a long time. My last comment is something that Brian mentioned or alluded to. When the 3 planning commissioners that denied this, or recommended you're not approving this application, their comments were not based on the criteria for an annexation. They were more related to a development, and some of them didn't even make sense. I can buy time from Ed Monacuco. I need just a few more seconds. They were saying Holly Street was not developed wide enough yet, and they wanted to see 22nd paved before they would approve this annexation. That makes no sense. the developer improves the land or the roads next to it, that would happen as part of the development. I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but they also mentioned that they wanted to see all of Pine Street and all of Redwood development completed before they would consider approving this. And that's just not the way it works. And so I found it confusing. If you guys chose to deny this, I hope that you would be clear on what criteria was not met. Because as we all know, if the criteria is met, then per Oregon law, you need to approve it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Susan. That's the end of proponents. Move into opponents. Reminder, just again, comments to 3 minutes. Dana Tyler?
Yes, I'm Dana Tyler, 680 Northeast 20th Avenue, Canby. And since we've been talking about traffic, the traffic study that was done, and this is a safety factor too, was the developments on Maple, which will be the country club, also facility going in, and the Maple Street and the Redwood development and the Pine Street development, was that all taken into consideration? Plus the possibility of a bridge. So how would all that impact the traffic in there? And the study they did, I go up and down Territorial every morning from Maple to our farm every day, twice a day, and my numbers are much higher than what they had. And I'm counting cars as I'm driving, and that's east to west. So I don't know how they got their numbers. I sure didn't by counting. Anyway, and that was at high peak times in the morning, 7.
Okay.
Yeah, to all that traffic coming through. Anyway, so that's the safety factor of how much would be put on those roads. There's no shoulders. That's a high impact area for recreation, runners, bikers, at least probably 60 a day people on bikes going to their work at Monacucos and IFA, and there's no shoulders. Any runner or walker, which I did it for 40 years, you have to watch out. And the speed limits there, 45, no, go a lot faster than that. And you have that hill that is significant as you crest, cars coming down. They just had a rollover on, Holly. So anyway, the other factors you talk, can I borrow?
No, you still have,
oh, okay.
You still have to, yeah, your little
okay.
warning lights.
Is there
right there.
really a need in inventory? Has everything really been counted? I can't believe it. And we're going to hit a crunch here. Housing is not going to continue as it is, the sale of homes, because we're going to be in a recession and the market will flatten out. So they have to take that into account too. And then also the soils, I know you said that it had been considered. The reason they moved it to a 2 is because of the perking of it. This is only found, this loam that's in that area, it goes 300 feet down. It came about by the Missoula flood, 300 feet down, and it's only in a half-mile radius right there. That chunk has that soil. And that's why IFA located there, to have that soils. That's why Monacucos are so successful with their, so that's a sustainable thing. IFA provides a third, 10 million trees for forestry, which we've got fires going on to replace burned out forestry, and the timber industry to build homes.
Sure.
So, you're looking also at that factor, are sustainable and resources.
Dana,
our food and our...
You're at time, Dana.
Yep.
All right. Well, and I'm watching the Stafford gentleman jotting down your comments, and they'll have a chance to address those here in a second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Canberra? and then after Mr. Canberra would be Mr. Vargas. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good evening. My name is Bob Canberra. I live at 1338 North Maple Street here in Canby. The reason I'm here tonight is really to speak about a measured and orderly rate of development which tries to preserve a sense of community. And I fully understand what was presented here as far as not meeting a 3-year supply and that there's a deficit. I understand the words, but it doesn't seem to make any face sense to a citizen here. I've attended the Planning Commission meetings a lot and went through every one of the developments that have been approved in the last year and a half. And we have hundreds of, I don't know what you would call them. There are areas that have been approved, such as Redwood, the land that's going to be developed between 13th and the river. We have Cougar Run, Timber Park. I can go on about all these developments we've approved within the last year and a half. It doesn't seem to make face validity, sense that we still have these deficits, and with each one of these developments that have come before you, there still is deficits. It just doesn't make sense. And why are we building up such huge tracts of land that are being developed here without really looking at what the cost is? One of my main concerns is traffic. And Holly and Territorial is impacted greatly by a lot of traffic every day of the week. It is our pass-through traffic that is going through. This development, or this concept plan, calls for another 200 homes in this area, which adds to that barrier. We also had a presentation last night that says that if this bridge is ever built down on the river, it's going to change the number of cars coming into Canby from 50 an hour to something like 200 an hour. That's going to flood into Holly and Territorial, that four-way stop. I think we need to take a pause to see what we're approving as far as developments and to see, can our local streets sustain this type of pace? And it really is concerning. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Vargas. Good evening. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Lawrence Vargas. I live on 2005 North Lupine Street in Canby. And basically, the other two people have touched on the similar items that I wanted to talk about. Number one, of course, the soils that are there. In the Planning Commission meeting, there was quite an extensive report out on the quality of the soil and how unique that soil is. And I think it's very important to preserve that. And you cannot find this kind of rich, fertile soil anywhere within Oregon or in the United States, for that matter. There was a lot of emphasis put on that. So I think that's very important to consider that. The second point is the traffic. Again, I know people have already talked about that, but during the Planning Commission meeting, it was discussed quite extensively. And I don't believe that the traffic studies are as thorough as they should be, because right now they're doing traffic studies on how many cars are coming. But at the moment, we've got building going on Redwood. We've got planning. There's all these lots that have been annexed into the city already. Buildings going on Redwood Street, on Pine Street, along Territorial. Once those are built out, those are going to have cars coming in. And I know one of the commissioners on the Planning Commission had said maybe it would be a good idea to step back for a year and see after that builds out, Now let's do a traffic study and get a real picture, because these aren't built out yet. We don't really have an accurate picture. And again, as we mentioned, the elephant in the room, the bridge, we know if that comes through, that's going to just flood the streets that are not capable of holding that kind of traffic. I mean, our infrastructure around that area of the town is not capable to hold that many cars. And so I think it would be prudent as a city council to sit back and take a look at the developments that are going on first, see where we are after those are built out, then do a traffic study that would give you more relevant numbers about the true nature of the number of cars that are passing through this area. Because I think as city council, you should consider the people in the area, the quality of life that's going there with the traffic problems that are going to occur with this rapid development. And I think we should slow down a bit. I know the plan that was put out in 1984, that was 35 years ago. Things have changed drastically in the last 35 years, and I think we should take a look at how is this area looking now compared to how it looked 35 years ago, and consider how it's going to impact the people that are around there, and how it's going to impact the city going forward. Yes, I realize we have a shortage of homes, and we will going forward, but let's sit back as a city and take it slowly. There's no need for us to rush. You know, I think the big draw of Canby is the rural nature of the city, and I think that's what promotes a lot of tourism. That's what brings people here, makes people feel welcome to come in here to the Dahlia Festival, to the fairgrounds. And if it ends up being a suburb like Wilsonville, nobody's going to want to come there. And I think we need to try and focus on preserving the nature of our town. But again, most importantly, I think we should take a look at a true traffic study once the existing building's going on, and see that you get an accurate reading.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My last card that I have is listed as a non-pro, non-con, other, Ms. Mindy? Yeah, if you want to come up here. Hi, Mindy. How are you?
Hi, I'm Mindy Monacuco. I am a resident, 1742 North Laurelwood Loop, Canby, Oregon, and I'm also chairperson of the Bike Ped Committee. And I just wanted to emphasize the importance along Holly for a bike lane and sidewalk. Consider, you know, the before mentioned traffic that increases with that might be occurring, and also the popularity of that for a recreational route for runners and bikers, and then also especially for our commuters to the farms and nurseries, and for their safety. And like Dana had mentioned, you know, there is that rise there, so it is really important to have adequate bike lane there and sidewalk. Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. Great. Levi, rebuttal to the comments and questions, sir.
All right. Good evening. Again, my name is Levi Lavasa with Stafford Development Company, 8840 Southwest Holly Lane, Wilsonville, Oregon, 97070. And with me, I have our consulting traffic engineer to address a few things off the bat, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I am Daniel Stumpf. I work with Lancaster Engineering. I'm the consulting engineer for the applicant. Our address is 321 Southwest 4th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97204.
Great. Welcome. So just really quickly and broadly, just to talk about traffic, and I'll let Daniel be more specific about this right at the end here, but the traffic study and how numbers are generated, something that he'll cover. Ms. Tyler talked about runners and bikers coming on streets in the area, and improvement of those streets is required with any future development. Again, this is not a development application, this is an annexation and development concept plan application. However, in the future, if subdivisions were to be constructed on North Holly Street and Territorial Road. Those are designated collectors that will have 70 feet of right-of-way, I think 46 feet of pavement, a bike lane, a planter strip, and a sidewalk on frontages of any subdivision that gets proposed. That'll be more important on Holly because there's property outside the UGB on Territorial, unfortunately. So that improvement would have to be kind of an action of the city to take some land from them. Mr. Canberra talked about orderly measured growth and development, and was kind of wondering how, with all the developments that have been approved, those numbers work out. And every subdivision that he mentioned was part of that study. There was nothing that he said that was left out. Most of them that he mentioned have already gone through the land use approval process, but have not been have not started construction yet. So there's not a plat recorded. You mentioned Timber Park, which is a huge one, which was included in there. You saw that's where like 84 of the currently available lots as of the submittal date came from. So all of that stuff was accounted for. We didn't have to try and make stuff up to make it obvious that there's a need for residential land in the city. We talked a little bit more about soil, and like that soil map showed, there's just two types of soil in Canby. There's good and great. The comprehensive plan says to go for the good stuff first if you're going to develop, and leave the great stuff to be developed later. So that's what this is. We're trying to develop the lowest classification soil in the city of Canby, or immediately outside, that is within the UGB. We have to remember that the UGB surrounds this property, so it is designated for urban development. It is already within the growth boundaries of the city of Canby. So that's what I hope we can remember here. And no need to rush was mentioned by Mr. Vargas, along with traffic scope and bridge, but there really is an important aspect to timing of development, and if you wait too long, then you end up in a situation like you have in the city of Portland, in the metro area, on a smaller scale, where there is such a high demand and such a shortage that people start getting priced out faster than they probably already are in Canby. It just ends up causing a lot more trouble in the market by going too slow. If there's more lots than are needed for somehow, if that occurs in Canby, if tons of annexations are approved and plats recorded all really quickly, then people probably aren't going to develop them, and probably not going to build houses on them unless there's someone that wants to buy it. The whole climate changes at that point. So having more land in is not going to people aren't going to just lose sight of economics and start building willy-nilly. There's a reason, and there's an order to things. So I'll let Daniel talk a little bit more about how the numbers are generated for traffic and why, and the scope with nearby developments.
Okay, so I'll first touch on the scope. So all material that was, we had scoped the project with the city and their consulting engineer, DKS Associates, and we had requested that they provide us with any relevant data as far as developments nearby to be included within our traffic study, and we included all data that they provided to us. With regard to trip generation, which Levi wanted me to elaborate a little bit more on, we used a methodology of trip generation using the IT trip generation manual, and within this manual, it's a accumulation of multiple studies of residential subdivisions, that kind of stuff, and we determined we utilized an average trip generation rate to project trip generation for the site, and so this is a method that is accepted by most jurisdictions, as well as with the city of Canby.
Yeah, so again, on the traffic, there is we're not just having our engineer come up with the best recommendation for us. This is reviewed by the city's engineer, so everything that is within that report is representative of what the city has asked us to prove and show. And so, again, the city and myself, we both have to rely on the professionals that we hire to do more complicated things than I'm capable of. And so moving forward, I hope we can understand that the traffic has really been considered, and any future developments will improve roads. So all the concerns about roads not up to standard, those will be if something is developed across the street. Specifically Locust Street, if you look at that, I think there's probably a lot of people on there that are realizing they're missing half of a street, or at least a quarter of one. And if there's development happens on Locust Street, specifically on the property we're talking about, that whole frontage is going to get improved. There will be additional pavement, there will be a curb, a sidewalk, a gutter, but there will be a planter strip, and it may even be one of the Green Street planter strips, not the bathtubs that everybody had removed out at Locust initially, but really low swales. I think I was talking to Hassan about what would go on out there. And so there's a lot of the concerns are addressed by development that are coming up right now. But,
so hang on, Lee, my question for you.
Gordon's going to jump up. Thanks.
Gordon, did you have something?
Go ahead and ask this
It was a trap that kind of wanted to address, I think, Mr. Canberra and Mr. Vargas's point about how does Redwood and Pine traffic factor into the numbers? Because I think that's specifically what I want to try to get answered.
Yeah.
Because to their point, right, those are not built-out subdivisions yet.
Correct.
And we know what we are projecting based on what's going in there house style-wise, but how does that then roll forward into something?
So
again, we're down the road here. I get that, but in terms of just traffic counts.
Yeah, so the very beginning process of a traffic study is traffic scoping, and that is something that the city provides to us. They say via the traffic consulting engineer, being DKS Associates, they say this is everything you need to account for. This is everything that we think that you should consider in the traffic report that you hire us to do or hire your own consulting engineer to do. And this will make sure that everything continues to operate accordingly. And beyond that, the comprehensive plan and the transportation system plan have both already considered this property as part of future Canby expansion. So by being within the comprehensive plan already, the transportation system plan is already addressing future traffic concerns. And that's part of what the update was that that had initially been requested from DKS, was to help be more specific about the Canby trip generation. The Canby has their own special trip generation type of thing that they want us to use, so that's what we did. And it met all of the criteria. The only warrant, again, was a left turn lane in 2028 eastbound territorial to Locust. Okay. So.
Did that cover it? Yeah. A couple points I wanted to bring up about preserving the rural nature. That was the intent and purpose, and is the intent and purpose of Senate Bill 100 and urban growth boundaries, is to dictate where development goes so we can preserve the farm, the forest, and the natural beauty of Oregon. And this is inside the urban growth boundary, as we all know on that. And then going into recession and housing going to flatten out, that's great, because the market is never wrong, as we say in the development business. Real estate development, home building is a reactionary behavior. We build when there's demand. If the demand flattens, we lessen building. We slowed the amount of homes that we build since July. I mean, we react to the market pretty fast, and we better have a pretty clear crystal ball, because we bet on it every time. We're a spec home builder. So it self-regulates, the market does. So if there's a slowdown, the development will slow down. But the final point I really want to just make is that it is phased, it's not coming all right now, but most importantly, this application meets the code.
Thank you. Any other questions right now? No. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'll close the public testimony. Back to us in terms of any other questions for Mr. Brown?
No.
Not for me. No? Okay. And I guess we'll just roll into the discussion. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go for it.
So, the soils question that comes up, I think it's an emotional issue for a lot of people too, because the idea that there's good soil and great soil, I think it's hard for people to feel like, well, we're sacrificing the good soil and maybe even some of the great stuff. And so, but I guess, the truth is that if nobody wants to buy that and farm it, and it's within the urban growth boundary, that's kind of out of our hands. Am I correct in characterizing this? Unless the city wants to purchase that land, which we're not interested in purchasing the great land and farming it ourselves, it's kind of open to who wants to develop because it's zoned accordingly.
Correct.
I want to make sure that I'm clarifying that for the audience. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can feel for the emotion behind that. I understand people with the traffic concerns, and I hope that the explanation that Levi gave will help alleviate some of that, and that gets handled in the process of development, not at this level. And I respect our planning commissioners and their concerns, but I would agree that those were outside the scope of the criteria, and that we should have approved this, and I'll be in favor of it tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Parker?
Well, I see it as a two-step process, that there's annexation and then there's development.
Right.
And I think the decision on whether this land was going to be developed was made a long time ago and put into the urban growth plan. Senate Bill 100 said, here's where you can build and here's where you can't. And we have been presented with a legacy developed by the people who sat here before that agreed that this is where the development's going to take place. So in terms of an annexation, it looks pretty clear to me. When we get to the development phase, I am going to want to hear from Bike and Pedestrian Committee, and I'm going to want to hear about sidewalks and roads and that type of thing. But I think we're getting a little more sophisticated in the city and realizing that this is a two-step process. And when it comes to annexation, the question is, does it meet the criteria? And so far, there's nothing here that I see that does not meet it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councilor Varga?
Yeah, I'm right there with you as well. I definitely understand the desire to slow down growth, and trust me, I'd love to do that if we could as well. I love the small town feel of Canby. That's why I moved here in 2012. That's why I'm raising my family here, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we maintain that small town feel. I mentioned it in a planning commission meeting one time that the small town feel doesn't always necessarily come from how many people that live here, but what's in people's hearts. And so even though we're growing, we can still maintain that small town feel. And so I encourage you guys to continue to maintain that small town feel, because that's what's in your heart. As far as what our responsibility is, it falls under the law, not our desires. And I can't see anything where this doesn't, it may not be what we want to see happen, but it falls under the law, and the law says it's okay. So, that's, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Councilor?
I want to, like Councilor Height, address a little bit about the soil issue, because I am from Canby. I was raised on a farm in Canby. As my brother and I got older, my parents realized that though I love to eat filberts, had no desire to farm filberts. And it is very emotional, because it's something that I really love about where we live, and I think it's an important part of our culture and community here. That being said, you can't force people to want to farm, and you can't force children to want to follow in their parents' footsteps, and then you can't restrict the property rights of people who decide that they've owned a farm, that land is within the urban growth boundary, and they elect to bring that in to the city for someone else to plan. And so I empathize with that sense, because this community is more than tripled in size since I was a kid, and I really empathize with it. But it's difficult. Just because we want farmland to exist doesn't mean we can make people want to farm. And that's the real challenge of that part of our culture. In regards to traffic and everything else, I share many of your concerns. That's not a particularly safe area right now, and adding, we do need shoulders, we do need bike paths, we need things like that. But as others have said, that comes in the development process, and I think that you'll see that we'll have a very skeptical eye in terms of how that's addressed as we move into the next stage. But as far as annexation into the city, I see no reason that it doesn't meet the criteria that's given to us by the state of Oregon.
Thank you.
And speaking about the annexation piece too, I think it was Bob Camber that talked about there's so much that we've annexed lately, and a lot of it just hasn't been developed. It's not platted yet too. So I think that's what Bob was talking about a bit is, I don't know how many acres, but a lot of it, they're not ready to develop. Just like I think how many 8 of these other property owners or whatnot are not ready yet and might not be for 10 years. So I think it is important to emphasize the phasing that some of you have spoke of, and that it will be gradual and there's 30 months. It's hard because I live practically across the street and Larry's my neighbor, so I know the feeling like, oh my gosh, this is happening now, 240 houses. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, there's 19 acres that is going to be, they'll be coming up eventually for us to be subdivided, and then the others eventually. But it's kind of helpful, I think, to see it in phases and in bites. That's how I think about it. And before I was on council, I had no understanding of the process like that, and so I would have probably been testifying like you, Larry, like, what are you doing? But up here, having done this for 4 years, I get our responsibilities to uphold the city code and the comp plan and make the amendments as necessary. So I'll be approving this as well, even though emotionally I don't love it. The city, we do need inventory. And again, this is not a development, but if we constrict our inventory, then the prices are going to go sky high of the existing inventory, and we don't want other people priced out of Canby either. So it's difficult, but I think it meets our standards for annexation.
And it's something that we've talked about before. I always say, like, that people are coming to, population's growing and we can't really stop that. And Canby's going to grow, and we either need to grow out or up, or a combination of the two things. And until we can build lots in the sky, we're going to have to make some decisions. And unfortunately, that means we're going to have to eat up land we would rather not eat up at times emotionally. And that's just, there's no other place to go than out or up. Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown, can I have your services at the computer for a second? So based on the recommendation pieces here on the screen, are we looking at options 1, 2, or 3? Is that what's on before us there on that?
No, you're looking at
three-step alternative.
That is a package, so if you look at the sample motion,
That's the one you need.
talks about all 3 of them are part, if you're going to move toward approval.
Thank you.
You need to address all 3.
I just wanted to clarify that for us up here.
So to make a motion, we read that entire passage? Is
No.
that what you're saying?
I think just the bottom
Just the
one where it
bottom?
says
That covers-
council sample motion for approval.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve annexation zone change file ANN 18-05, zone change 18-06 pursuant to the alternative option outlined above in this council memorandum.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Hensley, seconded by Councilor Varway to approve annexation zone change file ANN 18-05/zone change 18-06 pursuant to the alternative option outlined above. Did they cover it all? Okay, as in the memorandum?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Do we give a vote
Oh,
on
I'm
that?
sorry.
Would
You need
like
to vote on it.
that?
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 5-0. Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Levi. Big word. Okay. That was Hensley.
Mayor, could we give the audience about 1 minute to clear out while I have a map that I want to set up to?
It's not appropriate for me to walk down there, is it? I should
You got a
say-
minute.
Do I have a minute?
Yeah, you got a minute. They were clearing out.
Yes, you really does have a.
Oh my God.
I'm kidding.
Told you with him, we need to do city administrators at the beginning.
You made it. Ryan, I have a question. And so does Councilor Parker. Yeah. On the map, what we're showing
On territorial,
square area. Is that outside Mtg? It's already
Outside. It's weird.
Okay, that's the line. That island is what we're talking about before. We weren't sure.
It's not marked. It's bad. It's really bizarre.
it just seems like an odd place.
It's zone EFU.
What's that?
It's CFU.
It's really good soil.
Yeah,
I
it
think.
is. It's fun.
That's the supreme.
Yeah, it's untouchable without legislative change.
Hence the finger. The infamous finger they gave you.
Levi, you used a household rate of 2.9.
We're still live.
I thought that had dropped.
So the Portland State Population Research Center uses 2.8, Clackamas County uses 2.8. So that's just at the recent studies at least. So I just kept using their stuff.
Wait, 2.8 members per household, is that what you're saying?
And I thought that, I know where I saw it. It was the school district's demographer.
Yeah?
Because they're counting, because they're seeing a 10% decline in the number of students in their schools.
Smaller.
And so they're, maybe they don't need to use development code or that sort of thing. But that's where it was, 2.1 per household.
Wow.
And
We're back from a quick break from between the hearing and the rest of our agenda this evening. And so we will move into resolutions and ordinances.
Okay, the first item we have is Resolution 1308. This is requesting an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Canby related to the South Ivy Street Sidewalk Improvement Project.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Mr. Robinson.
The city and Clackamas County have been working collaboratively for several years to develop an intergovernmental agreement that would result in a jointly funded project to add sidewalk improvements, some overlay, some improving of the intersection at Township Road with signalization, and overall and I've presented a map over here on the left side in the old-fashioned way using paper. I hope that you'll forgive me. The hot pink section is a section proposed for improvement. The intergovernmental agreement between the city and the county actually transfers authority to do the design work to the county from the city and establishes an area of responsibility for the city that includes a proportion funding of the project and a willingness to accept the responsibility for road maintenance at the completion of the project, actually substantial completion of the project. The portion of the road that the city will be obligated to take is not limited to the pink section, but actually will extend out to the city limits, which I'll talk about in just a minute. The total project cost estimate is $2.1 million. The city's match is $437,000. County has agreed to donate staff time of up to $250,000 if the cost goes above the $2.1 million, and have additionally agreed to contribute up to an additional $156,000 if the project budget goes over the estimated total project cost. If the project is greater than the $2.1 million plus the $250,000 plus the $156,918 contribution from all agencies, the city is obligated to pay 100% of that cost differential. It was the best deal we could negotiate with them, and they did come up substantially from where they began in our discussions with them several months ago. The area of improvement extends from Highway 99, and what you're seeing is South Ivy. On the left, or the north end, is Highway 99 and South Ivy intersection, and then heading up to your right to the south and ending at the bend, which is right in front of Leal Elementary School, is the balance of the project. This is the area that will be improved. My request to you today is to improve this intergovernmental agreement, and I will tell you that the county is chomping at the bit to get started on this project. I have committed to them that if you approve this resolution and IGA tonight, that I will hand deliver it to them, or have a staff person hand deliver it to them in the morning so that they can get it to ODOT so we can get this project underway. That's how anxious they are to get it moving.
This is good news, Rick, because we've been following this and talking about this now for almost 6 years.
Yeah.
And this is good that we're finally to this point where we're going to get it designed and get it going. So this is great.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make it clear that our obligation isn't only to take into the city that stretch that's in the hot pink, but it's everything that is within the city limits, and that actually is consistent with our responsibility anyway, because we've annexed up to where that yellow section is, which I'll be discussing in a later agenda item this evening. But so that's coming our way no matter what, and we've got a couple other steps that we need to take after this is approved, and I'll discuss them in a follow-up item this evening.
Great. Any comments or questions for Mr. Robinson?
Just hip hip hooray, that's all.
Yep. Great. I'll take a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 1308, a resolution requesting an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Canby related to the South Ivy Street Sidewalk Improvement Project.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve resolution number 1308, a resolution requesting an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Canby related to the South Ivy Street Sidewalk Improvement Project. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0.
The next item you have is ordinance 1500. This is before you for second reading. This is the condensed version of the title, proclaiming annexation of 5.03 acres, including 4.84 acres of real property and 0.18 acres of adjacent North Redwood Street right-of-way, amending the zoning and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the City of Canby.
Great. Thank you, Kim. So this is a second reading. Anybody need an update on which piece of property or what this was that we were talking about? This is a previous annexation and zone change from a couple meetings ago.
North Redwood, yeah. Okay. Well, I'll make a motion. I move that we approve ordinance number 1500, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 5.03 acres, including 4.84 acres of real property described as tax lots 400 of portions of Southeast 1/4, Section 34T 3SR.1 EWM, tax map 31E34B, and approximately 0.18 acres of adjacent North Redwood Street right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5-acre to city medium-density residential for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Height and seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve ordinance number 1500, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 5.03 acres, including 4.84 acres of real property described as tax lots 400 of portion of Southeast Quarter, Section .34, T.3S, R1E, WM tax map 31E34B, and approximately 0.18 acres of adjacent North Redwood Street right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5-acre, RRFF5, to city medium-density residential R-1.5 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits. Any further discussion or question? All those in favor?
It's a roll call.
Second reading.
Ah, dang it, second reading. Roll call vote.
Councillor Height?
Aye.
Councillor Parker?
Aye.
Councillor Hensley?
Aye.
Councillor Farwig?
Aye.
He recused himself last.
This is the one I recused myself.
Yes.
Yeah, so scratch that. Yeah.
Councillor Spoon?
Aye.
Great.
4-0.
Motion passes 4-0.
Is it an abstention? Isn't it an abstention?
Yes.
It's an abstention.
4-0-1.
401.
The next item you have is ordinance 1501. This is proclaiming annexation of 47.647 acres, including 43.79 acres of real property and 3.857 acres of adjacent road right-of-way, amending the zoning and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the city of Canby.
Great. And we just heard this public hearing on this one, and so I don't think we need to review too much on that. So someone wants to make a motion, please?
I'll do all the work on this one this time. I haven't had a long one in a while. All right, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance number 1501, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 47.647 acres, including 43.79 acres of real property described as tax lots 100, 200, 400, 401, 500, 600, 601, 700, and 800, situated in the southeast quarter of southwest quarter, section 35T.3S R1 EWM, tax map piece 31E28C, and approximately 3.857 acres of adjacent road right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5-acre RR5FF5 to city low-density residential R1 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the city Canby city limits.
Second.
You get to read it next time.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varwig to approve ordinance number 1501, an ordinance proclaiming annexation into the city of Canby, Oregon, 47.647 acres, including 43.79 acres of real property described as tax lots 100, 200, 400, 401, 500, 600, 601, 700, and 800, situated in the southeast quarter and southwest quarter, section 35T3S R1E and WM tax map 31E28C, and approximate 3.857 acres of adjacent road right-of-way, and amending the existing county zoning from rural residential farm forest 5 acre, RRFF5, to city low density residential R1 for the entire area, and setting the boundaries of the property to be included within the Canby city limits. Any other discussion or comments, questions? Nope. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 5-0.
The next item you have is ordinance 1502. This is authorizing a contract with Curran McLeod Incorporated Consulting Engineers for design and construction phase engineering services for the South Ivy Street wastewater pumping station.
We have mentioned to you in passing on several occasions that in order to improve that portion of South Ivy on the west side of the road that you have already approved annexation for, but has not yet had a subdivision map submitted for your consideration, that we would be needing to construct a pump station to handle the sanitary sewer because of the relative elevation of the developments in this part of the city. We're going to need to pump the waste to a suitable location so that it can be gravity fed from there. We are working a little bit ahead in this particular project. We found when we did the Malino pump station that we were working against such a tight deadline that we always felt that we were just really up against obstacles in completing the project timely and making good informed decisions. So what I'm asking of you today is that you authorize us to enter into an agreement with Curran McLeod in an amount of approximately $123,800 for design phase engineering and construction phase engineering. What we're planning to do, and if you see the yellow that I've put on the map that's on the window there, to the far right or the south edge down to the bottom of that pie-shaped piece is the likely location of the pump station. The waste will flow down to that station and then will be pumped up to a location either to connect to South Ivy or across to South First Street, depending on what ultimately proves to be the most cost-effective approach. We haven't yet determined what's going to be most effective and what's going to be able to best serve both the east and the west side of that new development area. What we're planning to do is to complete the design, right-of-way acquisition, which I'll discuss with you in just a minute, along South Ivy Street, necessary to do the construction and engineering within the county's right-of-way, and then have that project ready to go when we get the first subdivision application. We'll have it on the shelf and we'll be ready to move forward with it quickly. The area in yellow is a topic of conversation that is a project area, the topic of conversation with the county being a separate intergovernmental agreement that would transfer responsibility for South Ivy Road in that area to the county sooner rather than later. That would allow us to work within the right-of-way, treating it as our jurisdictional boundaries, and allow us to construct the pump station on property that we control.
Did you mean to the city?
To the city.
Yeah.
Did I say the county? To the city. I'm falling back to my old roots. To the city. Transfer responsibility for the road to the city so that we can complete the project when it's appropriate to do so. We've had preliminary meeting with the county last week where we discussed this in detail. They're in agreement. We have a model. I've actually drafted the resolution, the IGA, and the other documentation necessary to accomplish it, but we're waiting to pull the trigger until we're prepared to move forward with that, because we don't want to accept additional responsibility until it's appropriate to be working in that that area of the roadway. So basically, we're getting all the moving pieces into place so that we can pull the trigger and just do the project when we need to without having to worry about acquiring right-of-way, seeking jurisdictional approval, and then doing the construction. So my request out of that very long explanation is that you approve this agreement that will allow us to initiate the design phase of this project, and we will be bringing to you at some point in the future an intergovernmental agreement once we put the pink area to bed, because we don't want to commingle them since we're taking the entire stretch formally once that project is substantially complete. Stretch from Highway 99 to our UGB along South Ivy. I've got the request letter already drafted, I've got the IGA already drafted, and I've got the staff report already drafted for that, but we're not going to pull the trigger until it's time. So that's kind of where we are on that, and the reason that we're asking for this today is so we can get the project designed, everything ready to go, and all we have to do is take it to bid.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. Questions on this at all?
No, but I'll make a motion if everyone's
okay.
I move to approve ordinance 1502, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Curran McLeod Consulting Engineers for design and construction phase engineering services for the South Ivy Street wastewater pumping station to come up for second reading on February 6, 2019.
And I'd like to second that because our city administrator has turned into quite the public works director here. This is an impressive job.
Motion's been made by Councilor Spoon and seconded by Councilor Parker to approve ordinance 1502, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with Curran McLeod Incorporated Consulting Engineers for design and construction phase engineering services for the South Ivy Street wastewater pumping station to come up for second reading on February 6th, 2019. Any other conversation or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Next on the agenda, new business. Review and approve city administrator recruiting steps, schedule, and profile.
That was being removed from the agenda.
Thank you. We did talk about that. That's gone. So moving into B. Findings, conclusions, and final order for annexation 18-04/ZC 1805 Swellen property. Do we need a refresher on that? Is everyone?
Actually, yeah, would you give a refresher? I'm having a hard time finding it, actually.
I've got it here somewhere.
Page 329, it says.
Yeah, we've got some massive files here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where I am on page numbers.
I apologize, I turned that over too fast.
Yeah, so was the applicant for this tax lot, or so annex of 5 acres, tax lots.
Oh, it's North Redwood.
This is the North Redwood.
North Redwood.
It's our 1.5 zoning and zone for medium density residential.
Okay. Okay.
Basically, the findings and conclusions were that we approved it and
just adopt the.
Yeah. All right, so I'd move that we adopt the findings, conclusion, and final order of annexation 18-04, zone change 18-05.
Great. Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Height, seconded by Councilor Spoon to approve the findings, conclusions, and final order for annexation 18-04, zone change 18-05. Any further conversation or discussion?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Abstain.
Nays and ayes. Anyone opposed? None. And an abstention?
Abstention.
Great. Thank you. Passes 4-0-1. City Administrator Business and Staff Reports. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I'm sure I do, but I can't remember what it would be, so I'll pass them.
Okay.
Oh, I could announce the 7 acres property appeal at Luba was heard today for a half hour of argument, they are going to give the official answer on Valentine's Day. So you guys and the public will know what Luba's final order is on February 14th of this year, which is also Oregon's birthday.
All right. Yes, it is.
Perfect.
It's also my daughter's birthday.
So you'll email us, right?
And
I will, and I'll keep you abreast of that. But I just
Yeah,
thought I
please
would
keep
let
us
you know.
informed on that, and we'll follow piece on that.
Absolutely.
At a later date. But thank you.
But that's good business to share with you.
Yes, no, very much so. And only 30 minutes, huh?
That's all they allow now.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks for the update. Second opportunity for citizen input this evening. Seeing no one rushing to the microphone, we'll move into action review.
You have approved the consent agenda. You've approved annexation 1805, zone change 1806, and adoption of the proposed North Holly Street development concept plan. You've adopted resolution 1308, adopted ordinance 1500, and you've approved ordinances 1501 and 1502 to come up for second reading on February 6th.
Great. Thank you, Kim. And there's no executive session that I've been made aware of. Nope. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. A second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Hensley and seconded by Councilor Height to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned. Good night, Kimmy.